Chapter 57. The explosion happened right before Lianping's eyes. He did not even have time to dodge and took it head-on. The shock wave swept through his body, and a stream of fresh blood spurted out. With a retch, he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. There were even some viscera fragments mixed in. The viscera was the human body's weakness all along. Even someone as powerful as Li Anping could not overcome it. And the explosion just now clearly caused him to suffer internal injuries. Most of the viscera in his body were ruptured. An ordinary person would probably have died long ago. Kanawa clearly would not let this opportunity slip by. Amidst his maniacal laughter, the water dragon already charged over, flicking its tail and rolling towards Lianping's body. However, what greeted him was a straightforward punch without any fancy moves. The power of this punch was not reduced in the slightest compared to before, directly shattering the water dragon's tail. When the water dragon reformed and charged forward again, Li Anping had already dodged. Whether it was speed or power, it did not decrease in the slightest. One could not tell that he was injured at all. Li Anping also had self-healing ability. Although his self-healing relied on devouring souls, the number was limited. Before the battle started, he still had 30 people's souls. The explosion just now consumed 5 people's souls. However, Kanawa did not know that at this moment, seeing Li Anping's lively appearance, a hint of fear also flashed through his eyes. The man before him was even stronger than he imagined, but he did not think that he would lose. Whether it was his self-healing ability or his devouring ability, it all proved his strength. If the explosion did not work, then he would change it. Kanawa charged forward again. What was different was that this time, bubbles kept emerging from the water dragon's body. The entire liquefied body looked like it was boiling. Before even getting close, one could feel a wave of heat coming at them head-on. This was Mo Chioyin's ability to control body temperature. Now that it was used by Kanawa, it combined with the liquefaction of his body. It was equivalent to turning the body into 100 degrees boiling water. It was not that Kanawa did not want to raise the temperature, but the boiling point of water was 100 degrees. Any higher, and he would have to evaporate. Li Anping's expression was solemn. Seeing the water dragon charge over this time, he did not counterattack but kept retreating. It was not that he did not want to counterattack, but the water dragon in front of him was all boiling water. If he smashed his fist onto it, Kanawa would only need to reassemble his body, and he would be scalded. If he was not careful and got entangled, it would be equivalent to being boiled in 100 degrees Celsius water. The threat was much greater than his venom attack just now. Hence, the field fell into a deadlock all of a sudden. Kanawa became a boiling water dragon, chasing after Lianping. But Lianping was faster than him, and he couldn't catch up. However, Lianping couldn't attack. The water dragon, chasing after him, couldn't do anything. On the road, loud rumbling noises continuously sounded out. Lianping was still all right, just dodging the water dragon's attacks nonstop. But the water dragon that Kano transformed into did not have any scruples. With a few casual sweeps of its tail, it overturned the cars parked by the roadside. He followed Li Anping into the shop on the first floor of the building and came out again. He didn't know how many walls and counters he had broken. Fortunately, the people nearby had been dispersed by the police. Originally, it was to prevent the 3 major powers from hurting the innocent. Now, it reduced Kanawa's killing. In the office, Hanwei looked at Li Anping, who was jumping up and down to avoid Kanawa's attacks, and suddenly sneered. So that's how it is. Speaking of which, Chioyin has already been sacrificed. A subordinate at the side said anxiously, "Captain, what do we do? Do you want us to go and help him?" "Help? What do you have to help?" Hanwei reprimanded. After liquefying, ordinary light weapons can't do anything to him at all. Flamethrowers, liquid nitrogen, rocket launchers, he has the ability to restrain them all. Then how about electric shocks? There's a high-voltage power line nearby. Someone suggested. Then who wrapped the high-voltage power line around this monster's body? Are you going or should I go? Flamethrowers, air bombs, and venom. Can you block them? Or are you counting on him to crawl in by himself? You guys quickly look. In the middle of the argument, someone suddenly shouted. Han Wei immediately turned his head to look in Li Onping's direction and exclaimed, "He doesn't want to live anymore." In the midst of the chase, Kano kept roaring. The ground was smashed, and cars and shops were destroyed by his brute force. Everywhere he passed by, it was a mess. As he charged around, he kept shouting at Li Onping, "Kid, didn't you want to kill me? Didn't you want to eliminate Lone Wolf? Why are you running away?" Haha, the women in Xia are very durable. Their skin is also better than ours, and they're easy to train. Every time I catch them, I just need to sleep with them for a while and give them a few injections, and each one of them becomes more obedient than the other. Kid, do you know how fun the women I sent to the cave were? They kept begging me, serving me, wanting me to let them go. Each one of them was even more despicable than a sow. After I kill you, I'll rebuild Lone Wolf and expand his scale by 10 times, 100 times. I'll make all the women in Xian kneel at my feet. Kano still wanted to continue scolding, but he suddenly stopped. Li Onping, who had been fleeing all the way, suddenly turned around and faced the water dragon that was charging toward him. Ha 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 ha. Kid, you're finally not running anymore? Kano was overjoyed. He knocked aside a large truck and charged over. I'm going to cook you and eat you. With a boom, his words came to an abrupt end. A punch smashed onto the water dragon's head, smashing the upper half of his body into smithereens. However, streams of boiling water immediately gathered together again, wanting to turn into the shape of a dragon. However, just as he was about to transform, another punch landed on his face, scattering the water dragon once again. Roar! Kano roared furiously. It was unknown how he managed to roar after his liquefied body had turned into a water dragon. In any case, he had only roared halfway when he was once again scattered by a punch. Boom, 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 boom. Li Onping threw punch after punch, hitting Kano's liquefied body like a pile driver. As long as that part of the other party gathered together slightly, he would throw a punch over, blasting the ball of water until it exploded and scattered, turning into countless water droplets. Meanwhile, Li Onping's fists were stained with blood. The layer of skin on the surface was already rotten, and the muscles and nerves inside were also severely scalded. However, at the same time that he was injured, the devoured soul also began to heal his injuries. Kano was not anxious at all about his body not being able to gather together. Watching Li Onping continuously shatter his body, he merely smiled coldly in his heart. Was there any use? No matter how many times it was shattered, this liquefied body could always recover to its original state, being able to gather and disperse. This was the characteristic of water in the first place. Idiot! He gave Li Onping a definition in his heart. There were times when a person's strength was limited. He did not believe that Li Onping could keep on fighting like this. However, the cold smile soon turned into anxiety and then into terror. Li Onping had been fighting for over 20 minutes. He did not even give Kano a chance to form. How is this possible? Isn't he tired? Don't his hands hurt? There was a time limit to the liquefaction of the body. It was impossible for a person or a carbon-based organism to become an existence like water for the rest of their lives. If the liquefaction was not released after the time limit, then the ability user would forever become water, real water, losing consciousness and losing the soul. Although Kano's ability was much stronger than Lu Jun's, he could not break free of the restriction of this ability either. The time for his liquefaction was also about to arrive in the end. But now his body was torn apart, all turning into blobs of water. Transforming at this time, was it to turn into a puddle of clear water and die? Or was it to transform into a human and bear Li Onping's wrath? He seemed to have no other choice. Barely gathering a small blob of water, Kano abandoned most of his body and finally became a human again. He only looked to be around 145 meters tall. Because he could only choose to restore a portion of his liquefied body, his entire body shrunk by more than half compared to its original appearance. With a boom, Li Onping also followed up with a punch. His punch finally landed on Kano's physical body. A bowl-sized hole was directly blasted out of Kano's chest, and his heart instantly turned to dust. Li Onping's eyes focused, and he immediately blasted towards Kano's head again. Finally, before the energy of his healing hands was exhausted, he forced Kano out. How could he let go so easily? Up until now, his energy still had 3 people's souls left. With a thud, Kano's head was blasted apart. Brain fluid splattered on Li Onping's face. He revealed a hideous grin and punched towards Kano's abdomen again. Several blood thorns darted out of his chest, stabbing towards Li Onping's eyes. But this speed was far too slow for Li Onping. With a wave of his hand, he sent the blood thorns flying, and his fist already smashed Kano's intestines and stomach into a ball of mush. Do you think I'll give you a chance to catch your breath? Li Onping reached his hand into Kano's body, grabbing the other party's spine. With a swish, mixed with Kano's screams, Li Onping pulled out the other party's spine. Kano's self-healing ability could not be used when he was liquefied. This was the result that Li Onping observed previously. No matter how he shattered Kano's liquefied body, the size of the water dragon did not change. But after the flames evaporated a portion of the water dragon, Kano's body became smaller, but it did not change back anymore. Li Onping understood 2 points in an instant. One was that Kano could not control his liquefied body. The second was that after liquefied, he did not have the self-healing ability anymore, unable to regenerate the parts that were lost. Thinking about it, it was also very normal. The physical body was very different from water in the first place. The self-healing ability could heal the physical body, but did not mean that he could also self-heal the liquefied body. At the same time, Jennifer, Lei, Jiao, Hanwei, everyone looked at Li Onping blankly. After pulling out Kano's spine, Li Onping still did not stop. He punched Kano's tattered body again and again. The rumbling sounds that sounded like a pile driver made everyone's faces turn pale. Meanwhile, Kano had long lost his human form. He looked like a pile of broken, minced meat pieced together. From time to time, he would extend a few bloody thorns or spit out a few mouthfuls of flames and venom to resist. But he was as powerless as a child resisting an adult. No one spoke. Everyone just watched quietly as Li Onping smashed Kano into a pile of minced meat with each punch. The minced meat was barely regenerated and gathered together, but it would be smashed into pieces by Li Onping. "Eat him," Black shouted arrogantly. "He's immortal. Even if he's turned into powder, he can still be resurrected after a period of recuperation. Eat him. Only when you absorb him can you really kill him. You'll become even stronger, closer to the ideal in your heart." Black shouted wildly, "Eat him! Eat him! Eat him quickly!" Under Black's urging, Li Onping's eyes became redder and redder, like clear rubies. "Shut up!" Li Onping shouted in a low voice, reaching his hand toward the pile of wriggling rotten meat on the ground. Chapter 58. Li Onping grabbed Kano with one hand and was about to tear him apart and pull him back. However, he realized that the weight in his hand had lightened, and that lump of flesh had already turned into clear water. Kano had liquefied his body once again. However, activating the liquefaction ability when he was seriously injured and had an incomplete body, his condition became even worse. Like a lump of jelly that had collapsed, his reaction was slow, and he could no longer move. Only a few tentacles that had grown out were still trembling slightly, indicating that he was still alive. "I'm just delaying for some time." However, this delaying method had eliminated some of Li Onping's initial concerns. He extended his head toward the clear water on the ground and started to suck it. The water surface churned intensely, and countless splashes of water flew out, showing how agitated Kano was now. Li Onping had actually drunk the water that he had turned into. "You actually dared to eat me." Seeing the water surface trembling agitatedly, Li Onping did not say anything. He merely increased his speed and sucked all the remaining water into his mouth, and then swallowed it. "Ha ha ha! You're courting death," Kano thought. The moment he entered Li Onping's body, the water that he had turned into was ready to cause a ruckus. However, an unprecedented sense of weakness invaded his consciousness. He felt that his body was shrinking continuously. Once the water was drunk by Li Onping, it started to be absorbed by his stomach and small intestine. Through the epithelial cells, it merged directly into Li Onping's blood and turned into blood plasma. Then, the water molecules in the blood plasma were transported throughout his body. Originally, when humans drank water, they did not need to undergo physical or chemical digestion. They could absorb it directly. However, Li Onping's digestibility aside, his absorption ability was also several tens or even several hundred times that of ordinary people. The moment the clear water that Kano had turned into was drunk, it was almost absorbed. When he struggled, wanting to crawl out, he realized that his body was already so weak that he could not move at all. He wanted to activate his abilities, wanted to spray out poison, wanted to release flames, wanted to increase his temperature. However, he was really too weak now that more than half of his body had been absorbed. He could not even activate his abilities. By then, his body had almost been completely absorbed, and only the last bit of his consciousness was still retained in the last drop of water. Am I going to die? I can't accept this. I can't accept this. Why? I am invincible. I have invincible abilities. How can I fail? I'm going to kill you. My ability is invincible. I will come back and kill all of you. Kanuwa shouted in his heart, but his last words were already not heard by anyone except himself. As the last drop of water was completely absorbed by Li Onping, Kano's consciousness, or perhaps his soul, felt a suction force coming from above. The magnitude of this suction force made Kanuwa unable to resist. It directly sucked the muddle-headed him over. Whether it was the body or the soul, Kanuwa was already 100% dead. And Li Onping, who completely absorbed Kano, only felt an explosive power appear within his body. A large amount of hot air appeared on the surface of Li Onping's body. His body swelled red. His muscles kept twitching, as if something was about to break out of his cocoon. What's going on? Don't be nervous. This is his ability, the so-called power of evolution. After you eat Kanoa, his remaining power will transform your body, making your body stronger and more suitable for battle. Li Onping did not finish listening to Black's following words. He knelt on one knee on the ground. All of a sudden, his entire body was getting hotter and hotter. That explosive power had already spread throughout his entire body. Every cell in his body, every piece of his flesh seemed to be changing. The heat preservation and thermal insulation ability were too poor. Adding an insulating layer and a thermal insulation layer under the skin, the outer shell increased the respiratory system, increasing the oxygen absorption ability, covering the stratum corneum, increasing the elasticity of muscles, increasing the body's defensive power, bone strengthening needed to be strengthened, increasing the number of bones in the hand, making it more nimble, reducing the bones in the chest, increasing the thickness and width, increasing the strength of the bones in the arm, changing the nerve transmission method, still needed to be faster, increasing the amount of blood protein, strengthening the activity of cells, and muscle strength, immunity, endurance, lymph. Li Onping's entire body was constantly being strengthened, or rather, evolved under everyone's gaze. His body structure was also becoming more and more non-human. Although on the outside, other than the large amount of hot air that was emitted, he did not change at all. Inside his body, he had already undergone earth-shaking, inconceivable changes. Bang! A punch smashed a small hole in the ground. Li Onping cried out in pain, supporting himself with both hands on the ground. The changes in his body had already reached the final juncture. The energy brought about by the devouring of Kano was constantly strengthening and repairing his body. He also felt more and more pain, and his physical fitness was improving in all aspects. Strength 4, 2, 4, 3, 4, 5, 5, 0, 5, 8. Speed 3, 2, 3, 5, 4, 0, 4, 7. And his physical fitness, which was already at its highest, also increased greatly once again. 4, 6, 5, 2, 6, 0, 6, 5. Finally, it stopped. Li Onping's physical fitness had also become Strength 5, 8, Speed 4, 7, and Physical Fitness 6, 5, far exceeding the limits of the human body. After all, every increase of 0, 1 in these values was several times more powerful than the previous 0, 1. The higher the value, the harder it was to increase. The current him would probably be able to smash the previous Kano into dust with a single punch. What's going on? Jennifer looked at Li Anping, who was kneeling on the ground in astonishment. The pupils in her eyes kept turning. His body temperature keeps rising. Is Kano attacking him? No, Lei Jiao muttered to himself. I can't feel Kano's psychokinesis anymore. There's something. Although Feng Qi's eyes were injured, his senses were still there. As Li Anping's body continued to evolve, he felt that there was something in front of him that was becoming more and more dangerous, even making his hair stand on end despite having countless combat experience. In front of the office desk, Han Wei looked at Li Anping on the screen, his brows furrowed tighter and tighter. His original plan to deal with the 3 major organizations was disrupted by Kano, and Li Anping, who appeared later, displayed even more astonishing combat power. And Li Anping, as an intruder, could also be Xiao Yekong's subordinate. However, no one had given him any written notice. His sudden appearance here really made things difficult for him. He was wondering if he should just drag things out and let Li Anping leave on his own. But he was also afraid that the higher-ups would blame him in the end, thinking that he was incapable. After thinking about it, he raised his head, grabbed the phone, and dialed a series of numbers. The password is XFei7430. The password is DXLQ FC4923. I request to use the satellite. He then turned off the phone and began to operate the computer in front of him. Under Han Wei's skillful operation, the interface kept changing, and finally, a satellite map of Jadeite City appeared. He kept dragging and zooming in, and the map on the screen became clearer and clearer. 10 seconds later, a figure appeared before Han Wei's eyes. Although the image was a little blurry, judging from the background and the person's approximate body shape, he could confirm that it was Li Anping. Looking at the image before him, a faint smile appeared on Han Wei's lips. Li Anping, who was in the field, naturally did not know that he had been locked onto by the satellite. He was adapting to his body that had been turned upside down. Strength 5, 8, Agility 4, 7, Stamina 6, 5. Li Anping stood up. His skin, which had turned red due to the rapidly increasing temperature in his body, had returned to its original state. Why can I sense my strength, agility, and stamina now? This is also part of evolution. From now on, you'll be able to sense your body's condition accurately. Not only that, you've gained a slight ability to evolve. From now on, the adaptability of your body will be stronger. The speed of increase in the values will also be faster than before. However, this is not your or my ability after all. The ability to evolve to this extent is already the limit. Ability to evolve. Li Anping's eyes flashed with a cold light. What do you mean by him and his ability to evolve? There was a deathly silence. Black did not answer Li Anping's question. It did not even say a word. It was only until Li Anping thought that Black had disappeared that he spoke again. My own kind, my brothers and sisters. Our abilities are different, but equally powerful. There seemed to be a hint of mockery in Black's voice as he continued. Humans, as a race that is far superior to you. After Kano is killed, they will also sense my presence. In order to delay their discovery of you, from now on, I will take the initiative to fall into a deep sleep. As for you, do your best to hunt and become stronger. If you eat enough people, you might have a chance to escape when you meet them in the future. Black, where are you? Say something. After that, no matter how Li Anping asked him, Black did not respond. It seemed that he had really fallen into a deep sleep. Footsteps could be heard coming from all around. Li Anping looked around and found that some police officers were slowly surrounding him. Although they were far away and were hiding in the corridor and the ruins, their heartbeat, breath, and smell could not escape Li Anping's detection. His 5 senses were now more powerful than before. The police officers only saw a blur before their eyes, and Li Anping had disappeared. They immediately went into hiding. However, The expected attack did not follow. They immediately launched a search, but they could no longer find Li Anping. Han Wei, who was in the office, stared at the screen in front of him. Li Anping's figure was displayed on the screen. However, he disappeared in the next second. However, under the computer's search, a similar target was found. The camera panned to an office building hundreds of meters away. Then, the figure flashed again, and the camera panned wildly. Finally, the target was found on the rooftop of a residential building. However, Li Anping still had no intention of stopping. He kept jumping and running. Every time he appeared on the screen again, he had crossed dozens or even hundreds of meters. Han Wei's eyes showed deep fear. Finally, Li Anping stopped and went into an abandoned factory that no one lived in. Han Wei also exhaled deeply and grabbed the phone beside him. However, at this moment, a hand pressed on his shoulder. Startled, he stood up at once, but found that his body was as heavy as 1,000 pounds, and he couldn't move at all. He tried to turn his head around, wanting to see who was behind him, but he could only catch a glimpse of a rough figure from the corner of his eyes. You are Xia." His voice stopped abruptly. Han Wei had already fainted on the ground. In the same second, all the living people within 300 meters of Han Wei, including all the police, the Secret Service, Fang Qi, Lei Jiao, Jennifer, and even Dong Man, lost consciousness in an instant. Their eyes were dazed as they stood there blankly. It was not until a minute later that they came back to their senses. However, at that time, part of the memory of Kano and Li Anping would disappear from their minds. Instead, it would be replaced by the memory of the fierce battle between the three major forces and the great victory of the Qilin group. The figure that appeared behind Han Wei hummed a song and operated the computer in front of him leisurely. He skillfully deleted part of the information and then pulled up Li Anping's location. After showing a satisfied smile, he disconnected the satellite connection. Finally, it turned into a series of bubbles and dissipated with the wind. Chapter 59. In the middle of the night, the abandoned factory was completely silent. It was the complete opposite of the bright lights in the distance. But in this deserted place where there was not a single person, a man was doing a handstand in the factory. The man was only wearing a pair of pants. His exposed upper body was covered with strong muscles. He used one of his index fingers to do a handstand on the ground. His body moved up and down as he bent his arm. If a normal citizen saw this scene, they would definitely exclaim in disbelief. They would be amazed by the man's strength and the strength of his fingers. But in the eyes of Li Anping, who was training, this was not even a warm-up. After 1,000 handstands, Li Anping stood up again, but his gaze was fixed on a shadow. "What are you?" There was deep doubt in his voice. This was normal. When faced with a person who looked like a human but had no breath, no heartbeat, and no signs of life, anyone would be confused and even afraid. The figure in the shadow walked out. He looked like a man. He was wearing the blue and white uniform of the Secret Service, the Xia Dragonfinch. The 5-pointed star on his shoulder showed that he held a very high position. The man's face was very pale. He had a buzz cut, no eyebrows, and no wrinkles on his face. It was impossible to tell his age. But when Li Anping looked at the man's eyes, he seemed to be able to see endless vicissitudes of life. It was countless separations, love, hate, and hatred. This was a man who had experienced countless things. But Li Anping could not feel any signs of life from him. There was no breath, no heartbeat, not even the flow of blood, the movement of muscles, bones, or the sound of his feet touching the ground. The man looked like a human, but he did not have any human characteristics. So when Li Anping asked him what he was, he did not ask him who he was. "You can call me Xia Laikong. I am one of the people with the highest authority in the Xia Dragonfinch," the man said quietly. Li Anping was shocked. He looked around, observed his surroundings, and settled down to listen to the nearby sounds. But other than the sound of the night wind blowing through the factory gate, he heard nothing else. "You don't have to be nervous. I'm the only one looking for you today." Xia Laikong raised his finger and pointed at Li Anping. "Let me show you something." Initially, he wanted to transmit a piece of information directly to Li Anping with his finger. However, He did not expect that after this finger was sent out, as soon as his thoughts touched Li Onping's brain, he would feel a gust of bloody wind blowing against his face. Countless dead people wailed in front of him, and hundreds of images of their deaths appeared repeatedly in his mind. Kano, Shang Jinbong, Shang Onghua, and many other villains killed by Li Onping. Li Onping's mind was like a hell for the dead. Other than killing, there was only death. He, on the other hand, was someone who had mistakenly entered hell. Xiao Laikong couldn't help but take a step back and look at Li Onping in bewilderment. "What are you doing?" Li Onping looked at the other with a puzzled expression. In his senses just now, the other party only pointed at him but didn't do anything. "I just wanted to tell you something through my brain." Xiao Laikong shrugged. "But it seems like your brain isn't very friendly." After saying this, he looked at Li Onping with a bit of surprise. "To put it simply, I hope you can join the Xia Dragonfinch." He raised his hand to stop Li Onping from replying. "Don't be in a hurry to refuse. I've been paying attention to you since you were in the city. I know what you've been doing, and I know that up until now, you've mainly been killing some criminals, villains, and scum. But do you think that's useful?" Xiao Laikong sighed and said, "You killing a few villains every day is indeed very satisfying, but it doesn't do anything. On the contrary, it'll only cause social unrest. Even for those who have died, their empty positions will make the remaining people even more chaotic. And will do nothing? Have you seen what happened to those innocent people, to those who were bullied?" Li Onping sneered. "I'm very sorry about what happened in the city and what happened to you. But even if you don't do anything, Shang Onghua won't be active for long. He's already on our blacklist. Moreover, the riots you caused in the city have directly or indirectly hurt many innocent people." Xiao Laikong said without backing down an inch. "Managing a country has never been a simple matter. We can't do it roughly. I admit that we have made mistakes, but acting recklessly like you will only make this country worse. You're compromising. Those scum can only be taught what's wrong with blood." Li Onping didn't agree with Xiao Liekong's words at all. The best way is to kill them all. People like Kano, organizations like Lone Wolf, if you let them go, they'll only get more greedy. Jadeite City's situation today is all caused by your weakness. Jadeite City, Xiao Laikong said solemnly. The Xia doesn't only have this one city. To be honest, it was only after I came here that I realized the situation in Jadeite City was worse than I thought. But there's nothing we can do about it. In recent years, Ice Fortress has been getting stronger and stronger, and they've been constantly sending troops to our borders. The army, the Xia Dragonfinch, more than 70% of its forces are concentrated on the northern border, confronting Ice Fortress. And the three major organizations here all have powerful forces. If we use force, it'll be too easy for the situation to worsen. There'll be great chaos. So the matter in Jadeite City will affect the whole situation. It's related to the entire southern border. Once we make a move here, the northern border's forces will be insufficient, and even the northern line will be eroded. Ice Fortress's army will take advantage of the situation to go south, spreading the flames of war to the entire Xia. That'll be a true disaster. In comparison, the matter in Jadeite City can only be delayed again and again. Seeing Li Onping frowning and thinking, Xiao Laikong continued, "That's why we need your strength. If more experts like you join us, the Xia will become stronger. Only then will we be able to control all the places in the country better. With the support of powerful forces, the laws will be strictly enforced. The underground forces will also lose their breeding ground. Then, bastards like Kano or Shang Jinbong won't be able to commit crimes. Isn't this much more effective than you directly killing some people?" Xiao Laikong said a lot, but he saw that Li Onping didn't react at all. He couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. At this moment, Li Onping said, "I'll go to Tianjing. I'll also go to the Xia Dragonfinch to take a look, but not now. There are still a lot of damned people in this city who haven't died yet." Seeing Li Onping's stubborn look, Xiao Laikong frowned and said, "You don't have to join the Xia Dragonfinch, but at least go to Tianjing to take a look. I'm sure you'll change your mind." Li Onping shook his head and turned around to walk back. Since Xiao Laikong had already discovered this place, he planned to leave and find a new place to rest. Don't make a move against Zhongli Hall and the Qilin group, especially Zhongli Hall. They have too many grassroots members. Once they cause trouble, the entire Jadeite city will be in chaos. There's also the Qilin group. We need to confirm their relationship with the Baiyu imperial family. Seeing that Li Onping didn't answer and turned around to leave, Xiao Liekong's figure flashed like a breeze and floated in front of Li Onping, blocking his way. Li Onping looked at Xiao Liekong blocking his way and said coldly, "You want to catch me?" Xiao Liekong smiled and said, "I've seen you fight many times. Your physical strength is very strong, but you have almost no control over psychic energy. You're just following your instincts, and the amount of psychic energy you have is only at the first level. It's fine if you meet an ordinary ability user, but if you meet a real expert, these will be your fatal weaknesses. Things like the physical body are too easy to restrain. The reason why humans are strong is because we know how to use tools." Xiao Liekong was halfway through his words when he realized that Li Onping had already walked past him, as if he hadn't heard what he said at all. He frowned and blocked his way again, saying, "Don't think that you have nothing to fear just because you've defeated a few minions. There are too many abilities in this world to count, and there are also many kinds of killing weapons. Not to mention other things, just fuel, air bombs, and high-energy lasers aren't things you can resist with your body alone. I've seen a lot of mutant ability users like you who are blindly confident in their bodies. To be honest, people like you are the first ones to die on the battlefield. So don't you want to learn psychic energy? Only when an ability user's own ability is combined with the use of psychic energy, that's true strength. You can even fight against modern armies. And Xia Dragonfinch has the most advanced training system in the world. You can understand the nature of your ability there, as well as the various techniques to use psychic energy." Xiao Liekong said a lot in one breath, but Li Onping didn't even stop walking, making his words a waste of effort. Looking at Li Onping's back as he left, Xiao Liekong couldn't help but laugh, muttering to himself, "I can't believe there's a time when I'm the one begging to join." With that, he waved his hand, and the entire factory instantly changed. All the doors and windows disappeared, and he and Li Onping were sealed inside like a box. Seeing that Li Onping finally turned his head, Xiao Liekong explained, "This is my ability. Many people know that my ability is 8 dragons and 8 faces, with the power of wind, rain, thunder, lightning, life, death, illusion, and destruction. The one in front of you is actually just my clone, the Mirage Dragon. It has about 1/8 of my power. What you see now is just an illusion. Even the nature of my body is just an illusion." Speaking of this, Xiao Liekong also breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't know why his consciousness was bounced back when he directly extended it into Li Onping's brain. He thought that illusions wouldn't work on Li Onping. He didn't expect that visual illusions would be effective on Li Onping. Thinking of this, he broke into a confident smile and said to Li Onping, "Let's make a bet. Within 24 hours, as long as you're unable to escape from this space that I've created through illusions, you'll have to agree to join the great Xia Dragonfinch." Li Onping finally understood why there were no signs of life on the other party's body. It turned out to be a clone of an ability. He looked up at the space around him and found that it was about the same size as the original factory, but the windows and doors had disappeared, leaving only black and white walls around him. "What if you lose?" Xiao Liekong's face showed a surprised expression. Then he smiled and said, "Kid, if you win, you can ask for anything from me." "Okay." Before Xiao Liekong could even react, his ears were covered by the howling wind. Li Onping had already disappeared from his sight, and there were even faint afterimages left on his retina. Then a fist smashed down on his head, slowly enlarging in his eyes until it filled his entire vision. Xiao Liekong couldn't even react in the slightest. It wasn't that he couldn't react in time, nor was it that he was too scared to react. It was that Li Onping's speed was too fast, even faster than his brain could process the information that Li Onping's fist was coming. In that instant, he didn't even know that Li Onping had already appeared in front of him. It wasn't until a fist smashed down on his head from above, and a huge force exploded on his head, that he really reacted. Boom! In the first second, the illusion's cage was shattered by the boundless force. Then, the shock waves produced by the fist's wind blew all the miscellaneous items in the factory into the air. Under the impact of the huge force, the cement floor under Xiao Yekong's feet was shattered into countless pieces, creating a huge crater. Countless stones and soil flew everywhere, and it was as if the entire earth was quaking. Amidst the billowing smoke and dust, a series of cracking sounds came from the factory, and cracks crawled up the walls. Then, with a loud boom, a wave of air gushed out, and the entire factory collapsed into ruins. If I hadn't used an illusion to appear in front of him in advance, and if his punch hadn't really touched me, this clone would probably have collapsed. Xiao Laikong, who was in the distance, looked at all of this speechlessly. Unknowingly, he had already lost his human form and turned into a small white dragon that was 2 to 3 meters long, floating in the air. This was an illusory dragon, which was the original form of this clone of his. Stimulated by the huge threat, he subconsciously returned to his strongest form. But even so, he didn't have the slightest confidence that he would be able to take on Li Anping's punch in this form. He would need at least 4 dragons to be attached to his original body before he would have the confidence to take on this punch. Just then, Li Anping walked out from the billowing smoke and dust. When he saw Xiao Yekong's appearance, he revealed a look of surprise. However, he didn't ask too much and only said to Xiao Laikong, "I want you guys to cooperate with me to clean up Jadeite City. When this place is clean enough, I'll go to Tianjing to take a look. Of course, if you don't agree, I'll do it myself." Without giving Xiao Laikong a chance to say more, Li Anping leaped with force and disappeared into the vast night. Only Xiao Laikong was left behind, looking at the ruins in front of him with a bitter smile. Chapter 60. The next day, in a small alley in the slums of Jadeite City, Li Anping was sitting in front of a dessert shop, chowing down on a few steamed buns and a bowl of tofu pudding. Every big city had its own slums, and Jadeite City was no exception. Li Anping did not wish to see a scene of debauchery, filled with indulgence and lust. Therefore, he had chosen to rest here last night. However, even so, in just one night, he had still killed a robber and a rapist who had stolen someone's handbag. Evil was everywhere in the world. Will it really be effective if I keep doing this? Li Anping could not help but recall Xiao Yekong's words from yesterday. Just as he was pondering, a large shadow suddenly covered him. He raised his head and saw a woman with a curvy figure, a full bust, and a pretty face standing in front of him. The woman was wearing a black uniform with a skirt and black stockings. She was more suited to be a white-collar worker in an office building. She would not be standing in front of a dessert shop in the slums like she was now. Li Anping finished the remaining steamed buns in a few bites, stood up, and moved away from the woman. However, the woman smiled and stood in front of him again. Li Anping frowned slightly and asked, "What do you mean?" "Hello, my name is Li Qian." The woman smiled and stretched out her hand. "General Xia asked me to cooperate with you and support your work in Jadeite City. I'm here especially to see you." For some reason, Li Anping felt that this woman seemed a little familiar. He asked curiously, "Did Xiao Laikong tell you who I am?" "Of course." Li Qian smiled. Her originally seductive face became even more alluring after she smiled. "Li Anping, have you forgotten who I am? I've always remembered you." Li Qian pointed to the black car parked at the entrance of the alley and said, "Let's talk while we walk. I have a lot to tell you." Li Anping didn't ask any more questions. He followed Li Qian into the car. The car swayed and entered the traffic. Within a few minutes, they reached the overpass. "To be honest, I've known you for a long time." Li Qian looked at Li Anping excitedly and said, "Originally, I wasn't in charge of this matter, but after I found out, I immediately told General Xia that I must come and help you." Li Anping coldly replied, "I don't need your help. I know you have misgivings, but please believe me. I will help you wholeheartedly." Li Qian said anxiously, "Have you forgotten? At the volcano bar in Zhongdu, it was you who saved me." After some explanation, It turned out that Li Qian was bullied by Shang Jinbang at the volcano bar. She was almost humiliated. Later, Li Onping chased after Shang Jinbang and indirectly saved Li Qian. So was you? Li Onping remembered. It was just that the other party's appearance at the volcano bar was too different from how she was dressed now, so he couldn't remember. However, the other party's vixen-like face left an impression on him. I'm here to repay you, Li Qian said, and General Xia also wants to take you into the Xia Dragonfinch. He has no ill intentions towards you. Seeing Li Onping's unmoved appearance, Li Qian anxiously said, What do I have to do to make you believe me? Commit suicide. If you commit suicide, I'll believe you, Li Onping said casually. He wouldn't casually trust the government, especially someone from an organization like the Xia Dragonfinch, who knew that when Li Qian heard his words, her face turned pale. She really pulled out a small pistol from her waist, unlocked the safety, and handed it to Li Onping. As long as you think it's meaningful to you, then you can kill me. Li Qian placed the pistol in Li Onping's hand and said, My life was saved by you. If you want to take it away, then take it away. Li Onping looked at her coldly. He suddenly raised the pistol and pointed it at Li Qian's temple. The cold barrel of the gun leaned against the side of Li Qian's face. Li Onping stared closely at Li Qian's expression, but he didn't see a trace of panic. The other party was still driving like before. It was as if what was pointed at her was not a gun, but a wooden stick. You really think I won't shoot? I'm not afraid of Xia Laikong. My life has long been ruined. If I die in your hands, then it's not a bad ending. Li Qian finished this sentence and looked at Li Onping indifferently. Crazy. Li Onping frowned. When Li Qian spoke just now, whether it was her heart or her muscles, there was no change at all. She seemed to have a strange feeling towards him. Could it be that after accidentally saving Li Qian once, she became infatuated with him? Li Onping felt a bit strange. He put the pistol back into Li Qian's holster and said, I don't need to kill you. How about I ask you a few questions? You're an ability user, right? Although I didn't feel your chi, Xia Laikong took you into the Xia Dragonfinch because you've awakened your ability. Li Qian was stunned for a moment before replying. Yes, that's right. Then tell me your ability. If you tell me, I can consider trusting you. Okay, I understand. Out of Li Onping's expectations, Li Qian still agreed without hesitation. Just as Li Onping was frowning and wondering what the other party was thinking, Li Qian said something that surprised him. On the surface, my ability is to control paper. I can make the paper move around my body according to my thoughts. General Xia and the others know this. But in fact, my real ability is not only this. Li Qian paused and accelerated the car. It drove on the highway at more than 150 kilometers per hour. The strong wind hit the car and made a loud noise. It covered a lot of noise. To prevent eavesdropping, Li Onping thought. Li Qian's voice sounded in his ears again. My real ability. As long as a person is interviewed by me, their actions in the next 30 days will appear in the newspaper in my hands as written information. If that's true, this ability is very strong. No, very strong. Just as Li Onping was thinking this, Li Qian continued. In addition, if I give up the 30 days of reporting, I can directly see what the person plans to do the next day from the newspaper. Of course, the 30 days of reporting and the second day of reporting can be saved after the interview and used when needed. But one interview can only save one report. After saying this, she looked at Li Onping with a proud expression and said, How is it? My ability is very useful to you, right? I didn't tell anyone about this ability. Until now, only you and I know about it. Even General Xia thought that my ability was very weak, so he let me come over to contact you. Otherwise, I would have been sent to the north to fight a long time ago. However, she realized that Li Onping was looking at her with a shocked expression. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? Is this woman an idiot? Li Onping looked at Li Qian with a shocked expression, thinking, she's telling me about this ability so directly? No. Could it be a trap? Li Onping asked, What is the definition of an interview? First, you need to know the other party's name and identity. Next, you need to ask questions. After asking, the The person being interviewed must answer truthfully. After they answer, the interview will be established. Also, the interview must be completed within 10 minutes. Ordinary people only need to ask one question, but ability users need to ask more. Level 1 needs to ask 2 questions. Level 2 needs to ask 3 questions. Level 3 needs to ask 4 questions. And Level 4 needs to ask 5 questions. Level 5 is more troublesome. You need to ask 10 questions. Li Yonping continued to ask, "Must it be face-to-face?" "No need." Li Qian shook her head. "It's fine as long as there's a conversation. Phone calls, communication devices, and voice over the internet are all fine." What a powerful ability. Although the so-called interview has special restrictions, this ability is still very powerful. Also, I can't feel any qi in her body now. Is she still a level 0 ability user? After her ability is upgraded, this ability will probably become even stronger. Seeing Li Yonping's silent expression, Li Qian said nervously, "Are you doubting me? I'm not lying to you. If you don't believe me, I can use my ability in front of you." "No, I'm not doubting your words." Li Yonping shook his head and said sincerely to Li Qian, "You can't possibly say such a lie that could be exposed immediately. So I believe you." "Really?" Li Qian said happily, "Only you know about this ability. I'm afraid that after the higher-ups in Xia find out about my ability, I'll be in danger. So I'll only let you use it. I also believe you. She's not really an idiot. If the higher-ups in the government find out about this ability of hers, she'll probably lose her freedom in the future." Li Yonping looked at the other party's happy expression and felt increasingly puzzled. "But for her to tell me this directly, is it really because I saved her? This silly woman, is she really trustworthy?" A week had passed since Li Yonping had killed Kano. The entire Jadeite city was in a strange state of tranquility. There had not been any fights between the 3 great influences during this week. However, the name of the Qilin group's leader, Feng Qi, had once again shaken the entire Jadeite city within these few days. It was all because of the great battle last week. With Xiao Yekong's memory modification, everything was now different. Currently, everyone knew that the Loyalty clan had joined forces with Violet and Lone Wolf to attack Feng Qi. In the end, Feng Qi single-handedly defeated them one by one, consecutively defeating the 4 heavenly kings of the Loyalty clan and their leader, Lu Jun, killing all 5 of them. Moreover, it was not just the Loyalty clan. Even Violet's modified human could not do anything to him, and one of them was crippled. Lone Wolf was also completely wiped out by Feng Qi and the Thunder WYRM. However, the Qilin group had also lost a long-haired female ability user in this battle. In the end, under the pressure of the Jadeite city's Secret Service team, they had no choice but to retreat. With Xiao Likong keeping the entire matter under wraps, no one knew of Kano's and Li Yonping's existence. Therefore, Feng Qi's battle results this time around caused a huge commotion. The title of the #1 expert in Jadeite City, which had already been recognized by others, was now firmly established. For a period of time, the Loyalty clan and Violet withdrew their forces, guarding against the Qilin group's attacks. The entire Jadeite city's thoughts changed, and countless people made various preparations for Feng Qi's possible next actions. However, a week had passed, and there was still no news from the Qilin group. At this moment, in a villa in the southern suburbs of Jadeite City, men and women in revealing clothes were walking around the swimming pool. The violent music was deafening, and it was a scene of revelry. The girls all had devilish figures, and their actions were debauched. The men were all big and burly, and many of them even had scars on their bodies. Moreover, even in the midst of revelry, most of them still maintained a basic level of alertness, glancing around warily from time to time. Clearly, they were not fully immersed in the revelry. A few of the big men lay on the deck chairs next to the swimming pool and said, "Haha, boss wiped out the Loyalty clan this time around. This Jadeite city will be ours in the future." Another man with a scar on his face pulled a woman who was passing by into his arms. As he groped her, he said, "Isn't there still Violet? That Jennifer looks like an ice goddess. I can't wait to see how the boss kills her. That's right. When the time comes, Violet and the Loyalty Clan will all fall, and Jadeite City will be our Cheelin group's world. Similar conversations, or rather fantasies, could be seen everywhere in the villa. However, in contrast to the revelry in the villa, the study on the second floor was completely silent. The excellent soundproofing blocked out all the music and voices from downstairs. Feng Qi was currently sitting behind his desk in the study. It had been a week since the great battle with the Loyalty Clan, and his injured eyes had finally healed. This was all thanks to the powerful self-healing ability brought about by the Cheelin blood. If it had been an ordinary person, this pair of eyes would probably have been blinded. And this time around, Feng Qi, who knew that he had killed so many experts from the Loyalty Clan and suppressed them with his skills, was now full of ambition. If it had not been for his injured eyes, he would have long since killed his way to their door, killing or subduing all the remaining members of the Loyalty Clan. Looking at the three subordinates before him, Feng Qi's face revealed a satisfied smile. These were all his capable subordinates in the Cheelin group, and the three of them were all outstanding ability users. Seeing Feng Qi looking at them, one of the three stepped forward. He was a middle-aged man, and under his green combat uniform were bulging muscles. He wore an eye patch over his left eye, and there was a deep and long scar at the corner of his mouth, making his entire face look very scary. The first impression he gave off was that he was not a good person. His name was Giant Bear, and he was impulsive and cruel. He had joined a mercenary group since he was young and participated in all kinds of wars. He was a senior figure in the Cheelin group, and since Feng Qi took over as the leader, he had always been regarded highly by Feng Qi and entrusted with important tasks. Leader, the Loyalty Clan is in pieces, and Violet only has a few modified humans left, so there's nothing to worry about. Leader, your injuries have also healed, so this is the time for us to carry out our grand plan. Tonight, I will take the little ones and charge in and destroy the Loyalty Clan completely first. I don't agree. Lei Jiao also stepped forward and said to Feng Qi, "It's true that the Loyalty Clan and Violet are no match for us now. But so what? The Loyalty Clan has been in Jadeite City for more than 20 years, and their foundation is deep, and their numbers are hundreds of times more than ours. And Violet is an international conglomerate, and they can send a large force to support us at any time. And don't forget that this is the Xia's Jadeite City, and the Special Task Force will not ignore our desire to unify Jadeite City. Last week, they were the ones who forced me and the leader to leave at the last moment." Lei Jiao, I think you're a coward. If you're afraid of death, just hide here when the time comes. You don't have to follow me. Giant Bear looked at Lei Jiao with disdain. The conflict between the two had been going on for a long time, and before Feng Qi took over as the leader, they were sworn enemies in the Cheelin group. Giant Bear had a violent personality, and when he saw Lei Jiao speak up and refute him, he could not help but quarrel with Lei Jiao. Seeing the two of them quarreling endlessly, Feng Qi frowned and shouted, "Enough! What are you arguing about?" Hearing Feng Qi's words, the two of them instantly wilted. Originally, Feng Qi had always been a man of his word after taking over as the leader with his powerful strength, and the battle results of the Loyalty Clan this time had convinced Giant Bear and the others. The cohesion of the entire Cheelin group had also reached an unprecedented peak. Feng Qi turned to look at another of the three and said, "Hedgehog, what's the latest news?" The one called Hedgehog was a skinny man with shoulder-length hair. Dressed in a suit, he looked more like a rich man's son from the upper class than a mercenary. Ever since he entered the study, he had not spoken. Until now, when Feng Qi called him, he stood up and said, "Violet's Jennifer hasn't made any big moves." Over at the Loyalty Clan, Lu Jun's uncle Lucien contacted a group of elders who had already retired and reorganized the Loyalty Clan's forces. They're using the banner of revenge against us. Haha, this Lucien was suppressed by Lu Jun his whole life and was forced to retire. Now that his nephew is dead, he has come out to take revenge. Clowns, nothing to worry about. Feng Qi's lips curled up. What about the Secret Service? Hearing the Secret Service, Hedgehog could not help but frown and said hesitantly, "Recently, The government seems to have been changing people, especially the Secret Service. Many of our acquaintances have disappeared. I don't understand what's going on. What about Hanwei? Is he still in charge? Fong Chi asked the question he was most concerned about. The Loyalty Clan and Violet were no longer a concern to him. Only Hanwei, the person in charge of the Secret Service in Jadeite City, was currently the biggest threat to him. Hanwei has been transferred away. Hedgehog's tone was uncertain. The Xia Dragonfinch sent a girl I have never heard of to take charge of the Jadeite City branch. Girl? Fong Chi asked doubtfully. Are you sure? It's a girl. She seems to be less than 25 years old. Her name is Li Qian. Hedgehog could not help but laugh. She even sent us an email telling us to all do some serious work. She can introduce us to jobs. It's covered by insurance, housing, and food. Hedgehog could not help but laugh again. Even Thunder Flood Dragon and Giant Bear could not help but laugh. Is this newcomer an idiot? Ha ha ha, I think she's too naive. Fong Chi shook his head. That's good. Since the Xia Dragonfinch sent an insensible girl over, we'll give her a lesson. Don't forget what we came all the way from 100 Moons to the Xia for. Hearing this, the other three revealed a sinister smile. Fong Chi ordered, Thunder Flood Dragon, get Lucien to bring someone to see me. If he doesn't want to, it's okay to scare him a little. Hedgehog, go, and check if Hanwei really left. Don't fall into their trap. Giant Bear, come with me to meet the new leader of Jadeite City. Chapter 61. On Jadeite City's Ring Highway, a black car was driving at high speed. The red letters on the license plate showed that the car was a military vehicle. The people in the surrounding cars couldn't help but show a trace of respect in their eyes. The Xia's military had been fighting against the ice fortress in the north for many years, so their social status in the country was now much higher than before. Their words also carried more weight than before. In particular, the military's temperament and bravery had been brought about by years of fighting. In the eyes of ordinary people, the Xia's military had always been valiant and elite. Li Amping was sitting in the front passenger seat, looking at the scenery outside the car window. No one knew what he was thinking. Li Qian was sitting on his right, driving the car. Seeing Li Amping's indifferent look, she couldn't help but say, "This operation better not be too bloody. I know they all deserve to die, but it's not good for the reputation." Li Amping didn't answer. It had been a week since they last met. During this week, Xia Laikong had already left. When he heard that the northern front line was in an emergency, he went back to provide support. Li Amping communicated with Xia Laikong through Li Qian and reached many conditions. Xia Laikong didn't simply ask Li Qian to help Li Amping clean up the criminals. Instead, he used another method. Have you cleaned up the people in the Secret Service team? Li Amping came back to his senses and turned to ask Li Qian. Yes. Li Qian nodded. According to the information you provided and the evidence we have already sent away all the people in the team who colluded with the Underworld and Lone Wolf. Including Hanwei, I used the opportunity of interrogation to interview him. I'm afraid you won't be able to find him again. Also, I'm now the boss of the Jadeite branch of the Secret Service team. Are you happy? As she spoke, she took out a small stack of newspapers and handed it to Li Amping. During this week, Li Amping also confirmed another thing, and that was that Li Qian liked him. He didn't know if it was because of some provocation, or if it was a disguise, or some other reason. Li Qian was obsessed with him, as if she worshipped him as an idol and would do anything for him. However, Li Amping still needed to test more because this kind of thing was too unbelievable for him. Li Amping took the newspaper and read it. There weren't many words on the newspaper. There were only a few lines, and the rest of the page was mostly blank. On the first day, Hanwei's head was covered. He was filled with despair and sadness, but he still didn't have the courage to resist the government. He couldn't sleep for the entire night, worrying about his future. The next day, Hanwei was sent to the hospital. He felt that his mind was becoming slower and slower. He knew that he had been drugged, but he didn't know when. Was it yesterday's breakfast? Or was it dinner? It doesn't matter. This is the standard procedure of the great Xia Dragonfinch. Aptitude users who are found guilty will be fed with poison. After a few days, they will be rescued and turned into an idiot. This is to prevent them from revealing secrets that they shouldn't. On the third day, Hiwei felt the whole world turn upside down, and his memories began to shatter. Lianping read a few more lines and found that Han Wei had gone crazy. The rest of the newspaper was filled with all kinds of crazy words. He tore the newspaper into pieces and threw them out the window. This is nothing. If it weren't for Xiao Yekong's pressure from the top, we wouldn't have been able to catch them even if we had more evidence. In the end, I would have had to kill them myself. And, compared to going crazy, they might be able to accept it more if I killed them myself. Li Qian continued. The Jadeite City Secret Service has suddenly lost more than half of its manpower. It's going to be a period of vacuum. You have to support me well. Don't just leave like that. Seeing that Li Anping had no intention of answering, Li Qian didn't mind. She had already gotten used to Li Anping's state over the past week. She rarely spoke. Most of the time, she was the one talking, and Li Anping was the one listening. But this feeling of being with Li Anping made her feel very comfortable. Because of the murder case, she had been taken into the Xia Dragonfinch by Xia Laikong. She had thought that her life had turned gray. She didn't expect to meet Li Anping again. Li Qian sneaked a peek at Li Anping, who was staring out the window, and the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up. Also, remember to call us when you kill someone in the future. Don't keep forgetting. For example, the man yesterday. Why did you have to tear him in half? You could have just stabbed him to death with your finger. Do you know how bad the impact was when he was discovered by the civilians? He deserved to die. Li Anping said coldly. He dismembered his own daughter. Tearing this kind of person in half is already too easy for him. Li Qian sighed helplessly. She could only urge, then you have to remember to call us and let us deal with it quickly. The scene is too bloody and will have a bad impact. When the time comes, even if you are in the right, you will become unreasonable. I know, Li Anping said lightly. Then he suddenly turned his head to look at Li Qian and asked, looking at these things every day, aren't you afraid of me? I'm not afraid. Don't you only kill bad people? Li Qian smiled at Li Anping. You saved me. I believe in you. Li Anping's eyes moved. In the end, he didn't say anything. He lowered his head and looked at the document in his hand. This was the goal of their operation this time. This was also the condition that Xia Laikong and Li Anping had negotiated. Li Anping stopped attacking the national forces in Jadeite City, but he could use evidence to bring down the officials and police. As long as the evidence was conclusive, Xia Laikong promised that he wouldn't go through the normal process and would directly hand it over to the Secret Service to deal with it. Li Anping would also receive the support of the Secret Service, providing him with information and the whereabouts of various criminals. But on the other hand, Li Anping also had to provide military help when the Secret Service didn't have enough personnel. There was also one last point. If it wasn't absolutely necessary, they shouldn't make a move against the three major forces, because it might cause a turmoil in the entire Jadeite city. After all, Zhang Yitang had 100,000 subordinates behind it. Violet was an international group that had investments in the entire Xia. And the leader of the Kirin group, Fang Qi, had the ability of Kirin blood, which was suspected to be related to the Baiwei royal family. At this sensitive time, Xia Laikong didn't want Jadeite City to have any variables that could affect the international situation. Simply put, these three major forces all had backgrounds that made Xia Laikong hesitate to act. But this was what Li Anping disdained. He planned to first use the power of the Xia Dragonfinch to clean up Jadeite City. As for the last three major organizations, if he found out that they deserved to die like Lone Wolf, he wouldn't care about the overall situation. If they needed to be killed, they would be killed. If they needed to be destroyed, they would be destroyed. Today, Li Qian sent Li Anping to a large-scale drug manufacturing den. The raw materials were transported from Yinxi in the south, and then manufactured into Xia. This large den itself was equipped with super powerful weapons, and it used to have an unclear relationship with the Jadeite City Secret Service. Now that the Secret Service had been cleaned up from top to bottom, it was time to eliminate this den. However, the Secret Service was currently understaffed, and the firepower of this drug manufacturing den was very strong. In order to reduce casualties, it was time for Li Anping to make a move. Time passed, and the car came down from a ramp and drove for more than 10 kilometers. Unknowingly, they were driving more and more remote. There were no signs of people or cars around, as if they had entered a place isolated from the world. The road under the wheels also turned from cement to dirt. After a bumpy ride, Li Qian stopped the car on a muddy and rugged path. She pointed to the woods on the side and said, "It's another 500 meters in this direction. The vanguard should have already arrived." Li Yonping nodded to show that he understood. He opened the door and walked into the woods. Li Qian was walking behind him with a briefcase in her hand. It didn't take long for Li Yonping to see a 3-story villa in the woods. The whole villa was surrounded by a 3-meter-high cement wall covered with glass and iron wires. The gate was a solid iron gate, and he couldn't see inside at all. Li Yonping could also hear the barking of dogs inside. It was simply a small bunker. When Li Yonping was about to go forward, 2 heavily armed men in blue and white uniforms suddenly rushed out. They pointed a machine gun at him and shouted, "Who are you? There's a military exercise here. Go away." Before they finished speaking, they shouted behind Li Yonping, "Captain?" Li Qian came out from behind Li Yonping and said with a smile, "Okay, Qin Yong, you tell your brothers to step back and leave it to him." Qin Yong looked at Li Yonping suspiciously. Although he didn't trust Li Yonping, the relationship between superior and subordinate made him have no choice but to obey. He led his men back into the woods. Naturally, Li Yonping had already discovered that there were 20 fully armed soldiers in the woods, faintly surrounding the villa. But when he saw Qin Yong and his uniform, he frowned. "Why did you let ordinary people join in? We don't have enough manpower. Anyway, we have your support this time, so I let them come. It's also a form of training." Li Qian explained, "This Qin Yong has a sense of justice. He dared to barge in a lone wolf's lair alone. Didn't you save him too? I thought you admired him." Li Yonping didn't answer. He looked at Li Qian and walked straight to the door of the villa. He clearly cares about others, but he doesn't want to say it. Li Qian looked at Li Yonping's silent face and laughed in her heart. I didn't expect Li Yonping to have such a side. The 20 people in the woods were shocked when they saw Li Yonping walk up without a gun or a bulletproof vest. Is this guy looking for death? Why did the captain let this kind of person go up? Boss, should we go up and drag him back? Qin Yong shook his head and looked at Li Yonping in confusion. Let's just watch. I don't think the captain will let him die. Li Yonping also heard their conversation, but he didn't care at all. When he was 5 meters away from the iron door, he realized that the other party had already noticed him. So he suddenly sped up and rushed to the iron door in the blink of an eye. Then he threw a punch at the iron door. Boom! The turbulent airflow was like the waves of the sea. Li Yonping's violent punch was like a bomb explosion. The thick iron door, which weighed a few tons, immediately burst open and shot toward the back of the door. The few criminals behind the door were pierced by countless pieces of iron in the next moment. They didn't even have time to react before they died. Someone broke in. They have a bomb. The alarm in the villa sounded. A few seconds later, fierce gunshots rang through most of the woods. Almost all the firepower was focused on Li Yonping at the door. However, the bullets only passed through a shadow and hit the ground behind Li Yonping. The next moment, a series of screams sounded in the villa. Chapter 62. Outside the villa, the soldiers led by Qin Yong looked at each other and couldn't believe what they were seeing. Inside the villa, the killing continued. Li Yonping flashed and appeared in front of a man with a machine gun. His right hand turned into a shadow and swung across the man's face. The man's head shattered, and Li Yonping, who was in front of him, had already walked away. Then there was another bang 10 meters away, and a pool of red and white blood spilled on the ground. In less than a minute, the gunshots in the villa had become sporadic. "I surrender. Don't kill me." A man with tears and snot running down his face threw down his gun and ran towards the door with his hands raised. However, Li Yonping grabbed a stone from the ground and threw it at his chest. He fell to the ground, and a large amount of blood flowed out from the man's body. He twitched a few times and stopped breathing. "I'll kill you," a small leader shouted and rushed towards Li Yonping. He held a grenade in his hand and wanted to die together with Li Onping. However, before he could take a few steps, Li Onping had already appeared in front of him. Then, the grenade was shoved into his mouth by Li Onping. It was stuck in his throat with his teeth and blood clots. In the last explosion, he vaguely saw that Li Onping had appeared more than 20 meters away, and his right hand was slowly pulled out of another man's chest. Sporadic gunshots rang out, but no one could hit Li Onping. His body was like a ghost, flashing everywhere in the villa. Even if a stray bullet hit Li Onping, it didn't leave a trace. At this time, Li Onping's physical fitness, his evolved epidermis, high-density muscles, and layers of protective structures under his muscles. 1 or 2 ordinary bullets couldn't hurt him at all. Bang! A man cried and kept shooting at Li Onping in front of him. Until he ran out of bullets, he was still crazily pulling the trigger. Under his desperate gaze, Li Onping slowly walked towards him, leaving behind a series of afterimages. Not a single bullet was able to hit him. Li Onping walked in front of the man. Suddenly, as if he was attacked, his neck tilted and his left hand reached behind his head. When he opened his hand in front of the man, a golden bullet was quietly spread out in his palm. Impossible! How is this possible? The man shouted crazily, but Li Onping shook his hand, and the bullet in his palm directly penetrated the man's brain. Everyone in the villa had already collapsed. When Li Onping came in front of the last person, his face was covered with tears and snot. He stupidly smiled and stuffed the barrel of the gun into his mouth. Bang! Total annihilation. When Qin Yong walked into the villa with his men, he saw such a scene of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Looking at Li Onping standing at the side, there wasn't even a drop of blood on his black sportswear. If it wasn't for his cold expression, he would look no different from an ordinary college student on the roadside. Okay, don't look anymore. Li Qian looked at Qin Yong and his men, who were sweating, and laughed. He clapped his hands and said, "This is the difference between an ability user and an ordinary person. You will also meet such opponents in the future, so if you don't want to work anymore, go back and tell me. Now, hurry up and search the entire house. Gather all the evidence and the drugs. We'll be leaving first." After saying that, Li Qian left Qin Yong and his men with a bitter smile and pulled Li Onping away. Li Qian stopped the car by the roadside and asked Li Onping in the front passenger's seat, "Is it okay to get off here?" "It's okay." Li Onping opened the door and stepped out while saying, "If there's anything, call me. Don't try to spy on me. Just send the information to my email." "Wait a minute." Li Qian also got out of the car and ran to Li Onping's side. He smiled embarrassedly and said, "It's so early today. Why don't I treat you to dinner? Speaking of which, we haven't eaten together yet. If you want to help me, just do as I said." Li Onping frowned and replied, "Oh." Li Qian looked a bit disappointed. She looked at Li Onping and said, "But General Xia told me to try my best to have a good relationship with you. You can at least put on an act with me. This way, he will put me in an important position and I can help you better into Xia Dragonfinch. There's no need. If our relationship is a bit cold, he will trust you more." After Li Onping said this, he walked around Li Qian in front of him and walked away. The other party's seductive face seemed to have no attraction to him at all. At this moment, Li Onping turned his head again and glanced across the street. His frown deepened. A group of people got out of several vans across the street. The leader, Fang Qi, led a group of underlings. He stood across the street and looked at Li Onping and Li Qian with a malicious look. No, to be more precise, he was looking at Li Qian. Li Onping didn't like the look of a gangster boss with a group of underlings. Finally, Li Qian also noticed that something was wrong with Li Onping. She turned her head and saw Fang Qi. The other party even smiled at her maliciously. Li Onping felt that Fang Qi looked a bit familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen him before. He had seen Fang Qi when he was fighting with Kano, but Fang Qi had transformed at that time, so he naturally couldn't recognize him now. Li Qian, on the other hand, had done her homework long ago. She was very clear about the heads of the 3 major forces in Jadeite City. He silently took a few steps closer to Li Onping and said softly, "This is Fang Qi, the boss of the Qilin group. The big guy next to him is called Giant Bear. Both of them should be ability users." After saying that, Li Onping looked at the big guy next to Fang Qi. The other party's face was full of scars, and his chest muscles were swollen like they were about to explode. When he saw Li Anping looking at him, he even showed a cruel smile and made a throat-slitting gesture. Then, Fang Qi left a group of underlings behind and brought Giant Bear directly across the street to walk over. Haha, Captain Li, I didn't expect to meet you. So coincidentally, I heard that you've been picking people up here every day recently. Is this your boyfriend? Fang Qi laughed as he spoke to Li Qian. His eyes slightly flicked to Li Anping at the side, and he no longer paid any attention. Instead, it was Giant Bear who stared at Li Anping with an unfriendly gaze. Fang Qi naturally couldn't have coincidentally bumped into Li Qian. He had specially come to see Li Qian. Although he admired, or perhaps feared, the Xia Dragonfinch's high-level power, that didn't mean that he would be afraid of Li Qian, a level 0 ability user. As for Li Anping at the side, judging from his chi, he was probably a level 1 ability user, so he didn't put him in his eyes. His purpose in coming here was both to probe and to warn him. After all, Li Qian was one of the Xia Dragonfinch's people. If Fang Qi directly killed her, he was afraid that within a month, he would have to accompany her to the grave. However, if Li Qian herself couldn't suppress the many strong people in Jadeite City, then she could only blame herself for not having enough ability. The Xia Dragonfinch couldn't possibly transfer the strength of the northern battlefront to specially come and hold down the line for Li Qian. Fang Qi wanted Li Qian to understand this point. The situation in Jadeite City wasn't something that a little girl like her could control. It was best for her to be a bit smarter so that everyone would have some face. What he was most afraid of was that Li Qian was too young and was the kind of hothead who didn't know the severity of the situation. She was either black or white and directly wanted to fight with the dark forces of Jadeite City to the end. That would be troublesome. This kind of person didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, but also liked to think of themselves as righteous. Killing them wouldn't be right, but not killing them wouldn't be right either. Hearing Fang Qi's greeting, Li Qian said expressionlessly, "Mr. Fang is really considerate. We're just ordinary friends. On the other hand, I'm not very familiar with Mr. Fang, so there's nothing to talk about. I just hope that you can manage your subordinates well and don't do anything illegal. When the time comes, they'll fall into my hands." Although Li Qian looked seductive, she never had a good expression towards men other than Li Anping. Fang Qi smiled, but his eyes revealed a trace of cold light. How can there be nothing to talk about? Recently, there's a group called Zhongyatang who's been causing trouble for me. Miss Li, you know that legal businessmen like me are most afraid of being caused trouble. Can I ask Miss Li to help me catch those bad guys quickly? As Fang Qi spoke, a black stream of qi rushed out from his body and pounced towards Li Qian and Li Anping in front of him. Even though Li Qian was only a level 0 ability user and couldn't see the qi, she could still feel Fang Qi's malice permeating around her. The suppression of psychic energy from a superior ability user seemed to instinctively release her fear. Li Qian was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. She almost fought back on the spot, and even her back became cold at this moment. At this moment, a broad back walked in front of her and blocked the qi released by Fang Qi. A trace of surprise flashed through Fang Qi's eyes. He looked at Li Anping and said, "Oh, little brother, what's your name? Are you also from the Secret Service?" The pressure that was as heavy as a mountain to Li Qian was no different from air to Li Anping. He glanced at Fang Qi and didn't say a word. He directly took Li Qian's hand and walked away. "Kid, our captain is asking you a question." Giant Bear, who was standing to the side, was furious. Seeing this kid so arrogant, he took a step forward and grabbed Li Anping's shoulder, wanting to drag him back. However, he saw Li Anping turn his head and look at him. At this moment, Giant Bear's gaze collided with Li Anping's. If both of their gazes were physical objects, they would be able to see that Li Anping easily crushed Giant Bear into pieces. There was no qi, no malice, and no murderous intent. It was just a simple gaze, but Giant Bear looked as if he had seen a ghost. He couldn't help but take a step back, and the hair on his back almost stood up. Li Anping's gaze was like looking at a piece of bread, a piece of meat, or a plate of vegetables. Although the giant bear himself could not clearly describe this feeling, he felt the same thing. However, it was just a gaze after all, so Giant Bear reacted after taking a step back. Then, he was so angry that his face flushed red. He felt that he had lost face in front of everyone. He cursed angrily and used his right hand to grab Li Onping's face with great force. However, he was stopped by Fong Chi single-handedly. Fong Chi whispered into Giant Bear's ear, "Do you want to die by making a move here?" Giant Bear was shocked and calmed down. However, his eyes were fixed on Li Onping, trying to remember his appearance. Li Onping acted as if nothing had happened and asked, "Is there anything else?" Fong Chi smiled at Li Onping. "It's nothing. Goodbye." He turned and left with Giant Bear. Li Onping also looked at the backs of the two people, then turned and left. Just as the two of them turned, Li Onping and Fong Chi gave orders to the people around them. "Send someone to keep an eye on this Li Qian 24/7. Li Qian, I want you to help me investigate the Qilin group. I want all the information on them." The difference was that Li Onping could also hear the other party's orders. The two of them were facing each other for the first time. Because of the issue of perception and force field, the smell of gunpowder was already overflowing. The only difference was that one could see the other's strength, while the other didn't even know what he was facing. Chapter 63. Tianjin, the capital of the Xia. More than 20 million permanent residents gathered in the most prosperous city in Xia. Compared to this place, Jadeite City was like a town in the countryside. Even the maglev trains that were rarely seen in other cities, the holographic advertisements, and the densely packed skyscrapers. The people of Tianjin were used to seeing such things. It was even something they faced every day in their lives and work. Deep underground in the capital, all kinds of secret buildings and military projects guarded the entire Xia without the ordinary citizens' knowledge. Somewhere in an underground conference room, in a huge and empty conference room, there was only a round table and 4 chairs. The 4 chairs were placed around the round table in the north, south, east, and west directions. But at this time, there were only 2 people sitting in the conference room. Sitting in the north was a white-haired old man. Although his hair was white, there were very few wrinkles on his face. There were no age spots or anything like that. His sharp eyes showed a vitality that did not belong to a young man. His meticulously combed hair made him look very serious. The old man was wearing a blue and white uniform with a 6-pointed star on his shoulder. At this time, he was looking at the display on the table with a serious face. There were all kinds of information about the conference on it. On the right side of the round table was a thin, middle-aged man. He wore glasses and looked gentle and scholarly. He didn't have the aura of a soldier at all. If it weren't for the blue and white uniform on his body and the 5-pointed star on his shoulder, others would have thought that he was a university teacher. The middle-aged man was Xia Liekong's original body. In terms of appearance, it was a world of difference compared to his phantom dragon doppelganger. At the very least, the phantom dragon doppelganger would make people think that it was very powerful. Maybe this was also a style that was made for the sake of deterrence. Xia Liekong coughed a few times. When he saw the white-haired old man turn his head, he said, "Everyone, then this time about the change of clothes. Let's do, as we said just now." "I have no objections." "I have no objections either." 2 voices came from the 2 empty seats opposite Xia Liekong. It turned out that the 2 people who couldn't attend the meeting were communicating with Xia Liekong and the white-haired old man via long-distance communication. If anyone in the Xia Dragonfinch could see this scene, they would immediately be able to guess who the 4 people in the meeting were. They were the top brass of the Xia Dragonfinch. He was the first in the entire country's fighting order. It was a national organization that controlled the strongest individual force in the military in the world, along with the other 5 organizations. It was known as the highest authority of one of the 6 most powerful superpower organizations in the world. He represented the 3 strongest powerhouses and the commander-in-chief of the Xia Dragonfinch. However, this time, only Xia Liekong came in person. The other 2, Emperor Yin and the Flying General, were still at the northern border. and the white-haired old man who looked rigid and serious was the nominal person in charge of the Xia Dragonfinch, Songbang. Seeing that the other two agreed, Songbang squinted his eyes and looked at the information about the change of clothes. Finally, he nodded lightly and said, "Let's do this for now. Let's test it in a small team first. We'll talk about it when we have results. Then it's over. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. The bastards in the north have been very restless these days." A voice came from an empty seat. "Wait, Zhurong." Song Bang stopped the meeting from ending. He looked at Xia Laikong seriously and asked, "Laikong, I recently heard that your phantom dragon went to the south." Xia Laikong was shocked, but he didn't show it on his face and said, "There is such a thing. It's a small problem, but I solved it. A mayor colluding with people from the League of Stars is not a small problem." After Song Bang said this, he looked coldly at Xia Laikong. His eyes showed obvious disgust. After he said this, the entire meeting room fell silent. Zhurong and the Flying General also stopped talking. It was indeed not a small problem. No matter what it was, as long as it involved the world's #1 superpower organization, it would not be a small problem. 10 years ago, the League of Stars brought shame to the Xia Dragonfinch. No one in the room would forget it. Knowing that he couldn't hide it, Xia Laikong said in a careful tone, "It is a little troublesome, but I've already sent people to investigate." Anyone could tell that his tone was perfunctory. However, compared to Song Bang's problem, Xia Laikong was more concerned about the other party's purpose. Is he trying to threaten me? Or is it because of the League of Stars? Or did he find out something? In the Xia Dragonfinch, the discord between Song Bang and Xia Laikong was not a secret among the higher-ups. The other two, Zhurong and the Flying General, had no interest in interfering. They were happy to watch the show. After all, one was a noble, while the other was just a commoner. They each represented different interests. Even if Xia Laikong was a senior figure, he could not change this. Song Bang smiled coldly and said, "No need. I've already sent my people to take over the League of Stars. I'm afraid they've already arrived in the Federation. You just have to wait for the news." Without giving Xia Laikong a chance to refute, Song Bang continued, "But this time there's still a criminal in the Zhongdu incident that hasn't been caught, right? His name is Li Anping, right? After killing so many people, you're just going to let him go? He's going to stay in Jadeite City. Old Fox, did you find out?" Xia Laikong understood and responded, "Although Li Anping is a bit impulsive, his motives are good. The problem is that he's too young and lacks guidance. Plus, his ability is not bad. I think we can recruit him." "Not bad? We don't lack people with good abilities." Song Bang did not let it go easily and continued, "A country has its own laws, and a family has its own rules. He killed so many people. If we let him go, how can we, the Xia Dragonfinch, have the face to take care of so many people in the country?" Xia Laikong was a bit angry after being scolded like this. He raised his voice and said, "I'll take responsibility for this matter. Ordinary people won't know. Now that we're fighting the Ice Fortress, what we lack is ability users like Li Anping. His ability will definitely shine on the battlefield." Song Bang was disdainful. His hand swiped across the screen, and information about Li Anping popped up one by one. A mutant ability. What's the use of having more strength and speed? This kind of person can't even compare to a tank. Then the two of them started to argue, gradually moving from Li Anping to the situation in the north, the management of domestic ability users, and other issues. They were all at loggerheads. In the end, Xia Laikong slammed the table and said angrily, "I've taken a liking to Li Anping. If you want to kill him, then kill me first." This was obviously a scoundrel's way of doing things. Song Bang naturally could not kill Xia Laikong, at least not now. However, it was hard to say if he had secretly thought of doing so. The Flying General was usually on good terms with Xia Laikong. Seeing that the situation was in a deadlock, he finally opened his mouth to persuade him. "Old Song is right. If we don't arrest such a rebellious person, the Xia Dragonfinch will lose face." Just as Song Bang was smiling, the Flying General changed the topic and said, "But I believe in General Xia's foresight. He can't be wrong when it comes to judging people. This Li Anping should be considered." "A bunch of nonsense," Song Bang scolded. The flying general acted as if he didn't hear him and said, "But let this Li Onping come to Tianjin. We'll take a look and observe him. How about that?" There was silence. Clearly, the flying general's suggestion had moved Xia Laikong and Song Bang. In the end, it was Xia Laikong who said, "I'm fine with it. Let him come in a few months." "How many months do you want us to wait?" "Let him come by plane tomorrow," Song Bang said angrily. "No, I promised him to let him stay in Jadeite City for a while." "Ridiculous!" Song Bang was so angry that he laughed. "The great general of the Xia Dragonfinch actually has to accommodate a commoner." The two of them were about to quarrel again. At this time, Zhurong, who had been promoted by Song Bang, said, "How about a month? I'll also be returning to Tianjin in a month's time. We'll watch together then." "Okay," Xia Laikong agreed. "Haha, when did the three of us have to watch a commoner together? Aren't you afraid of being laughed at if this gets out?" Song Bang laughed disdainfully, but in the end, he still agreed to this plan. Meanwhile, in Jadeite City, unlike the Xia Dragonfinch, who had yet to discover the true terror of Li Onping, Jadeite City was filled with people who were watching. Jennifer looked at the video in front of her with a face full of horror. It was the scene of the battle between Kano and Li Onping. Although she was also hypnotized by Xia Laikong, her mechanical eyes faithfully recorded the images she had seen. There was also a series of related data. In a coffee shop, Li Onping sipped his coffee while looking around casually. Li Qian, who was sitting opposite him, was on the phone. "Hello, are you Mr. Fong Han? We now have a shop in Blue Sky Square." "Hello, are you Mr. Yang Qi? We now provide private loans." "Hello, are you Mr. Jiang Li? We would like to do a survey." Li Qian made one phone call after another, pretending to be a telemarketer. The only constant was that he would ask for the other party's name at the beginning of each call, then cross off a name on the list on the table. Most of them hung up after hearing half of the conversation, but there were a few who showed interest and continued to ask questions. Fortunately, Li Qian was prepared and did not show his face. He made more than 20 calls in a row and only ended half an hour later. Li Qian only felt that her mouth was dry. When she saw Li Onping handing her a glass of juice, she immediately smiled. "How was it? Was this useful? Were we discovered?" Li Onping asked. Li Qian smiled and said, "Of course not. Don't worry, the ability has been activated." Chapter 64. Inside the cafe, Li Qian placed a briefcase she had been carrying on the table and pulled out a stack of old newspapers. She then placed the old newspapers on both her hands and closed her eyes. This was not the first time Li Onping had seen Li Qian display her ability. However, every time he saw it, he would feel amazed. Just how many more such amazing abilities were there in the world? He was slightly looking forward to it. A few minutes later, Li Qian opened her eyes again. She smiled and said, "It's done." After saying that, she handed the old newspapers to Li Onping. The original page had long since disappeared, leaving only a blank space. From the next day onwards, the things that the person who had been depowered did every day would be described in simple words in this newspaper. This was the method Li Onping and Li Qian planned to use to investigate the Kirin group. The same method would be used on the loyalty hall. Their leader was an ability user, especially someone like Fong Qi. He would have to ask at least 5 questions, making it easy for him to be detected. However, it was impossible for everyone around him to be an ability user. Lackeys, waiters, drivers, treasurers, they must all be ordinary people. As for these ordinary people, they only needed to collect their names and phone numbers through the police database. Then, they would call them one by one and ask for their names. That would be the end of the interview. Then, through the actions of the ordinary people around Fong Qi, they would be able to understand what Fong Qi was doing and what the Kirin group was doing. Li Onping looked at the blank newspaper and nodded. Then, he turned to Li Qian and said, "Next, you need to expand the scope of your surveillance and interview even more people. It is like a puzzle. As long as you put all the pieces together, you will naturally be able to find out what the missing piece in the middle looks like." "I understand." Seeing Li Onping's happy expression, Li Qian was also very happy. She added, "Next, I will not call them so closely. I will try to call them at different times to avoid attracting their attention. However, Li Qian was still somewhat worried. She asked Li Anping, I have no problem using my ability. However, there's so many people. Will you be able to watch them all every day? I have no problem with that, Li Anping said calmly. What he didn't tell Li Qian was that his brain was already different from normal people. Whether it was inputting information, summarizing information, or memorizing, his speed was far faster than ordinary people, just like how he quickly memorized the Western Indian language. The difference was that his brain's memory and analytical ability were stronger now. Li Anping was confident that even if he monitored tens of thousands of people at the same time every day, he could still completely remember what they did and analyze the trend of the entire situation. The only troublesome one is Violet. Li Anping said, Violet is an international corporation and even has the technology to transform people. Their company's technology is very advanced. Even a branch like Jadeite City is managed by a computer. Through your ability, we can only know what some ordinary employees are doing, but we don't know anything about the information in the computer. There's nothing we can do about it. Their technology is even more advanced than our Jadeite City's government. We've tried tapping phones and cyber attacks, but none of them worked. However, I heard that the leader of their branch, Jennifer, is just an ordinary person. Maybe we can think of something. First, we have to find her whereabouts, Li Anping said in a low voice. And to find Jennifer's whereabouts, they had to collect information on Violet. It seemed to be an endless loop. If there's no other way, we can only catch a few people, Li Anping said. Li Qian did not reject it. She was Li Anping's NC fan and supported Li Anping 100%. She only added, I can find some scum for Violet. There are many people who work with them in Jadeite City, and none of them are good people. Li Anping nodded in agreement, and no longer bothered about Zi Luolan, compared to this Violet branch that was mainly involved in smuggling. Qilin Group and Loyalty Hall were even more evil. Li Anping still remembered the long-haired woman he met at Lone Wolf's headquarters. This Qilin Group had an inexplicable cooperative relationship with Lone Wolf. Once the investigation is done, we can't let any of them go. On the other side, when Li Anping was investigating others, there were also people who were interested in him. In a laboratory in Violet's Jadeite City branch, Jennifer looked at the video on the screen in front of her, her heart unable to calm down for a long time. It was a clip of Kano's battle with Li Anping. Even though she had seen it many times, Jennifer was still shocked. Whether it was Kano's ability to copy other people's abilities or Li Anping's monstrous strength and speed, they were all amazing. Jennifer had used the laboratory's server to analyze it many times. According to the effects of the destruction of the environment in the video, Li Anping's strength and speed were terrifyingly strong. The server estimated that Li Anping's maximum strength was probably more than 10 tons, and his speed was about to break the sound barrier. If Jennifer knew that Li Anping had become even more terrifying after eating Kano, she would probably be shocked. However, she also knew that Li Anping's final transformation was extremely unusual. After he absorbed Kano's liquid, his body temperature rose sharply, and his body shape also changed. Jennifer's eyes flickered. But these changes, are they caused by Kano and his body, or are they caused by his body absorbing Kano? No matter what, Li Anping was of great research value to Violet. Just Kano's ability alone and Li Anping eating him were worth studying. If they could unravel the secret, it might even make Violet become a powerful organization like the League of Stars. However, after Jennifer compared her memory with the recording in the mechanical eye, she already knew that she had been hypnotized and brainwashed. In the whole of Xia, the only person who was best at this kind of thing and could do it so seamlessly was Xia Laikong. Of course, Jennifer knew how dangerous this Xia Dragonfinch was. Therefore, after she found the video, she did not dare to tell anyone. She directly uploaded it to her superior through the encrypted network, which was the president of the Xia, Wilson. Beep beep. A video request popped up on the screen. Jennifer clicked confirm, and suddenly a middle-aged foreigner with blonde hair and blue eyes with an aquiline nose appeared. The man's eyes were very serious. He looked at Jennifer and asked, Are you sure this video is real? I'm sure. How many people know about this now? Only you and I. I don't dare to tell anyone else. Well done. Wilson smiled. Jennifer, I'll reward you handsomely after we've captured this experimental target. However, I want to ask your opinion now. How many people do you think we need to capture the target alive? It's hard to estimate. Violet shook his head. The target's physical strength is amazing. As you can see in the video, ordinary poisons won't work. He also has a certain self-healing ability. The biggest problem is that we don't know what changes will happen to him after he ate Kano. If he can copy other people's abilities, I'm afraid we'll have to deploy S-Class Destruction Warriors. And this is Disya. Those dragonfinches won't allow us to interfere so far away. Our current forces are already at the limit of their tolerance. So, I suggest we don't capture him. Don't capture him. Wilson's voice rose. Do you know what this means? This discovery may even change the whole world. Once we discover the secrets on him, not only will we become the core of the company, we will even go down in history. You actually want to leave such a big treasure to rot in Jadeite City? Miss Jennifer, do you know what you're talking about? Of course I do, sir. Please allow me to explain, Jennifer said slowly. Li Onping is a human, not an animal. As long as he is a human, we can communicate. I think we can use conciliatory means to win him over. As far as I know, he is not a member of Disya Dragonfinch, nor is he a member of any large organization. We can definitely pull him over to our side. Jennifer saw Wilson's frown and was afraid that he would not agree and alert the enemy. So she continued to persuade him. I've checked Li Onping's data in Disya's government. He has been an ordinary person since he was young. His awakening ability and his devouring of Kano only happened in the past few months. I believe he still retains a lot of the behavior of an ordinary person. There is value in trying to communicate with him. Wilson instinctively disagreed with Jennifer's plan. However, she was the person in charge of Jadeite City and had some connections with the higher-ups of the company. Once he was rejected, Wilson was worried that she would bypass him and go to someone higher up. If that happened, he would go for wool and come home shorn. Therefore, he could only hold back his urge and say, "All right, I agree with your conservative plan. However, Miss Jennifer, you only have 2 weeks. If you don't get results in 2 weeks, I will capture the target at all costs. It doesn't matter even if I have to sacrifice the Jadeite City branch." I have no objections, sir. Wilson turned off the video call and was silent for about 10 minutes. He watched the video sent by Jennifer while thinking about Li Onping in his mind. Finally, he picked up the phone and dialed a number. "Let me, Tom, come over. I wanted to go on a business trip." Chapter 65. The changes in Jadeite City didn't only affect ability users. Regardless of whether it was the reshuffling of power in the officialdom or the capture of large amounts of dark powers, every change he made would truly affect everyone who lived in Jadeite City. Jianghai was a businessman who started from scratch. Some time ago, he had exhausted all his means and used all kinds of methods to finally establish a relationship with a person with real power in the city government. He was able to cooperate with the Jadeite city government on a project, which is a business that was guaranteed to be profitable. However, who knew that during this period of time, the officialdom was in a state of panic. The acquaintances who were originally in charge of his project had all disappeared. However, Jianghai had already invested more than 10 million yuan in it. Even his house and car had been mortgaged to the bank. Now that the person in charge was gone, the remaining people kicked the ball around, but no one was willing to take over Jianghai's mess. In a week's time, Jianghai was so anxious that he lost a lot of hair. On this day, Jianghai brought his brother-in-law, Kai Zhuan, to the government office building again. They were already waiting at the entrance at 8 in the morning. They waited until 11 in the afternoon and only ate a few mouthfuls of steam buns. Finally, a luxury car drove in from outside. When Jianghai saw it, he quickly followed. A fat man got out of the car and looked at Jianghai. "Director Jiang, why are you sitting at the door?" Jianghai cursed in his heart. "I've been looking for you for almost a week. If I didn't find a small star you were maintaining yesterday and buy her an 80,000 yuan bag, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to see you. However, when facing the fat man, he was still full of smiles. Isn't it all because I'm waiting for you, Minister Qian? For his own project, Jiang Hai could only endure the anger in his heart and be a grandson. He did not expect to continue working on this project now. These guys who ate people without spitting out the bones, as long as he could get back half of the money he had invested, he would be satisfied. Minister Qian looked at his watch and said helplessly, I'm sorry, Director Jiang. There's a meeting in the city. Why don't you wait for me? Okay. We're fine. You do what you need to do. We'll just wait. After a few hours of waiting under the scorching sun, Jiang Hai and Kai Juan were so hungry that their chests were sticking to their backs. Minister Qian still did not come out. Kai Juan could not help but complain, Brother-in-law, do you think waiting is useful? I think that Qian guy is playing us like monkeys. As long as I can get the money back, I can even call him Grandpa. Jiang Hai sighed. Now, except for the 300,000 yuan in the card, I have invested everything else in this project. If I can't get it back, Jiang Hai didn't dare to imagine such a situation. As he spoke, Minister Qian finally came out of the building. Jiang Hai quickly trotted all the way, hoping that he could say a few words before the other party got in the car. Seeing Minister Qian waving at him, Jiang Hai ran over with a smile. Who knew that, just as he was about to say a few words, he saw Minister Qian take out his ringing mobile phone and chat with someone along the way. The more he talked, the happier he became. Even when he reached the parking lot, he didn't look at Jiang Hai. In the end, Jiang Hai's heart turned cold as he watched the other party get into the car. I've waited for nothing again. Unexpectedly, the car had only driven a few steps when it suddenly stopped. The car window was rolled down. Minister Qian said to Jiang Hai, Director Jiang, do you know Bailey Gong? Jiang Hai quickly nodded and said, Yes, I do. He knew that it was a high-end clubhouse. He heard that it was a place frequented by high-ranking officials or tycoons. Well, where are you going to find me? I'll go first. So Jiang Hai took Kai Juan and hurriedly took a taxi to Bailey Gong. Along the way, Jiang Hai raised some money and spent more than 500 yuan to buy a few good cigarettes. Looking at the cigarette in his hand and thinking that he hadn't eaten anything all day, he felt really uncomfortable. When they arrived at Bailey Gong, Jiang Hai left Kai Juan and went in alone to find Minister Qian, who knew that he would come out again in a few minutes. The cigarettes were given, but they didn't say much. Walking out, he and Kai Juan sat on the steps. Suddenly, he punched the concrete floor and cursed, "A group of bastards." Then, like a deflated ball, he collapsed on the steps. They waited for another 5 or 6 hours. At 1 o'clock in the evening, a staff member called in Jiang Hai and Kai Juan, who were sleeping soundly, and asked them to settle the bill. As a result, when they saw the bill, both of them were shocked. It was 220,000 yuan. The two of them looked at each other and didn't speak. At this time, Minister Qian walked out drunkenly, patted Jiang Hai on the shoulder, and said with a smile, "Little Jiang, it's been hard on you today." Jiang Hai quickly took the opportunity to ask, "Minister Qian, how is my project? Your problem is more complicated. The original person in charge has been transferred away. Now there is no evidence. We need several departments to cooperate. You wait for our notice." Minister Qian went back to his room. Jiang Hai could only bite the bullet and pay the bill. Kai Juan, who was on the side, cursed as soon as he went out. What the hell are they playing? More than 200,000 yuan is gone, just like that. They didn't even hear a sound. What else can they play after spending the night? This is already considered cheap. If it was some second or third-rate model, I'm afraid it would be more than this. Jiang Hai smiled bitterly. And to let you pay the bill is giving you face. I don't know if I have enough money left. Brother-in-law, are you still going to wait? Kai Juan said angrily. If we continue to wait like this, we will lose our coffin money. Jiang Hai shook his head and sat silently on the stairs. At about 10 o'clock the next morning, Minister Qian and 5 other well-dressed men walked out of Bailey Palace. Jiang Hai hurriedly greeted them again. Who knew that before he could say a word, he was stopped by Minister Qian. "Okay, Mr. Jiang, thank you for your hard work. Come to my office directly later." Hearing this, Jiang Hai's spirit was shaken. After sending them to the car, he and Kai Juan took a taxi directly to the office building again. This time, Minister Qian ordered him to register at the door, and he went in. Jiang Hai was careful all the way. Finally, he came to Minister Qian's office and gently knocked on the door. "Please come in." After Jiang Hai went in, he found that Minister Qian looked up at him and then went on to approve the documents. So he could only stand aside with his head down, not saying anything, and just waiting. For a time, the whole office was only filled with the sound of pages turning. More than half an hour later, Minister Qian stretched and saw that Jiang Hai was still standing. A trace of pity flashed in his eyes. He knew that Jiang Hai had suffered an undeserved calamity this time, and he himself had not done anything wrong. After all, not everyone could treat him. If it weren't for Jiang Hai's cleverness, he wouldn't have seen him at all. A few days ago, there was a small boss who had also been robbed of his payment. After asking for it several times, he didn't get it back, so he went directly to the higher-ups. As a result, he was still detained and would be repatriated to his hometown in a few days. Minister Qian coughed dryly. When he saw Jiang Hai looking up at him, he said, "Mr. Jiang, your matter is more complicated. I see that you're an honest person, so I'll tell you directly. You won't be able to get this money back." Jiang Hai was shocked. Could it be that the money had really been wasted? Minister Qian went on to say, "This involves several departments. Their levels are about the same as mine. I can't help you alone." Seeing Jiang Hai's look of despair, Minister Qian added, "But if this matter can alarm the boss, there might be a chance for a turnaround." Jiang Hai looked at Minister Qian expectantly, but found that the other party didn't continue to speak. Instead, he stared at him with a smile. Jiang Hai's heart moved. He immediately took out the bank card from his wallet. Counting the money spent yesterday, there were still 70 to 80,000 yuan in it. He was afraid that it wouldn't satisfy Minister Qian's appetite, but he only had this much money left. Gritting his teeth, he handed it all over to Minister Qian. Minister Qian nodded with satisfaction. He waved his hand and said, "Okay, you can go out first. Wait for me to give you news." Jiang Hai walked out of the office building with a heavy heart. He was afraid that the hope of getting the project money back was not great. If all his belongings were gone, then half of his life's work would be ruined. Not only that, Jiang Hai thought of his wife, his son who had just entered high school, and his parents, who had been farmers all their lives. Brother-in-law, brother-in-law. When Kai Juan saw Jiang Hai coming out, he quickly ran up and asked, "Brother-in-law, how is it? Did you get the money back?" Money? When Jiang Hai heard this, he suddenly felt a pain in his heart. Tears couldn't help but flow down. The grievances and anger of the past few days couldn't help but come out. He looked back at the office building. He really wanted to rush in and beat up all the vampires and make them spit out his money. Who knew that when he looked back, he would see something strange? Jiang Hai pointed to the roof of the 10th floor of the office building and said foolishly, "What is that?" "What?" Kai Juan also looked at the roof. He was younger than Jiang Hai, and his eyes were much better. He looked in the direction of Jiang Hai's finger. There seemed to be a flash of disbelief on his face. After a few seconds, he hesitated and said, "That is Minister Qian?" On the roof of the office building, Minister Qian's face was pale and sweating. His feet were hanging outside the building. A man was holding his collar with one hand so that he wouldn't fall. Chapter 66. Li Onping looked at the frightened fat man in front of him, and a trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. "Tell me all the properties under your name, your bank account numbers, your funds, and your stocks." When Minister Qian heard Li Onping's words, a fierce look appeared on his face. He said sternly, "Do you know what you're doing? Do you know who I am? What you're doing is illegal." Li Onping sneered and let go of his right hand. A scream sounded. Minister Qian grabbed Li Onping's right hand tightly and shouted, "Let me up! Quickly pull me up!" However, Li Onping was unmoved. He watched as Minister Qian's arm slowly slid away from Li Onping's right hand. Finally, he couldn't bear the pressure and shouted, "I'll talk! I'll talk! Quickly pull me up!" Li Onping snorted and threw him back to the roof with his left hand. At this time, Minister Qian's limbs were sore and weak. He collapsed on the ground, but he felt an unprecedented peace of mind. Speak. Li Onping looked at the fat man, lying on the ground with his eyes rolling around. He sneered in his heart, then took out the newspaper and read a few things. All of them were things that Minister Qian thought no one should know about because he did it secretly. After Minister Qian heard it, he looked at Li Onping in disbelief. How did you know? Who are you? I know everything. Li Onping looked at Minister Qian coldly and said, if you hadn't gone too far during this period of time, I wouldn't have cared about these trivial things. Tell me everything honestly, lest you fall from the 10th floor and become a meat patty. Seeing that Minister Qian was still hesitating, Li Onping became impatient. If it were in the past, he would have killed him already. It wouldn't have been so troublesome. So he took a few steps forward and stepped on Minister Qian's thigh. With a clear, crisp sound, Minister Qian's thigh bone was directly broken. But he didn't have time to lament. Seeing Li Onping put his foot on his other leg, he immediately poured out all his assets like beans from a bamboo tube. He was even forced by Li Onping to reveal that he had been transferred to his wife, younger brother, and parents. After saying this, Minister Qian seemed to have aged 10 years. He no longer looked as energetic as before. Dejected, he asked, where exactly are you from? The Anti-Corruption Bureau? Or the Ministry of Integrity? Seeing that Li Onping was ignoring him, he continued, do you think I want to do this? Do you know how many mouths are waiting to be fed? Even if I don't take money, others will. At least I'm doing something useful. Li Onping still ignored him. He took out his phone and called Li Qian. I sent it to your email. Did you receive it? Okay. Li Onping nodded and hung up the phone. He turned to Minister Qian on the ground and said, in a week at most, all the property under your name will be frozen and then recovered. As for your fate, I think you know it yourself. At this moment, the iron door on the top floor was knocked on, and the voice of the security guard came from inside. Is anyone there? Open the door. I'm inside. Come and save me. After Minister Qian shouted this sentence, he subconsciously looked back at Li Onping. However, there was nothing on the top floor except for him. There was no one else there. On the other side, Li Qian asked Qin Yong to take his men to various government agencies in Jadeite City to arrest people. They were all corrupt officials caught according to his newspaper records. During this period, as Li Qian kept making calls according to the list in her hand, her ability spread like a newspaper. There were thousands of people in Jadeite City being monitored, but Li Onping still only had one copy of the newspaper. This was another extension of Li Qian's ability. No matter how many people she monitored, they could all be displayed in a newspaper that could never be finished and could be searched by name. Originally, Li Onping only monitored the local underground forces and then killed those who should be killed. However, Jadeite City was a place where the underground forces were rampant. Many local government officials were in cahoots with the underground forces, so Li Qian's monitoring target gradually shifted in the direction of the government. Originally, since Li Onping promised Xiao Laikong that he wouldn't attack the government, he didn't want to do anything. However, after he saw some people, he was really angry. Although they didn't commit murder or arson, they were more ruthless than killing people. Therefore, Li Onping couldn't help but take action himself. However, this time, he didn't kill them directly like before. Instead, he made them reveal all their assets and let Xiao Laikong and the others search their houses. Then, he would give a portion of the money as compensation to the victims. This made them feel worse than killing them. After a series of arrests, Jadeite City's officialdom once again experienced a major earthquake. With this change, the entire Jadeite City's officialdom welcomed a cool breeze. It seemed that under the strict crackdown of the higher-ups, no one dared to neglect their duties or bend the law. However, humans are the most fickle animals. How long could they maintain such a beautiful situation? In Li Onping's room, other than a bed, there was only a desk with a computer. He had asked Li Qian to specially arrange this. He only needed a place to stay. However, Li Qian still gave him a credit card with a limit of 1 million so that he didn't have to worry about money. At this time, Li Onping was alone in the room. In the middle of the room, his eyes were tightly shut. He was using the little finger of his left hand to press against the floor, maintaining a handstand position. At this time, Li Onping's heart was calm, but all kinds of sounds were ringing in his ears. The sound of a couple quarreling upstairs. The sound of a couple on the bed next door. The sound of the TV. The sound of the radio. The sound of insects crawling under the floor. He could even sense the flow of air in the room. Obviously, after eating Kano, his five senses had been greatly enhanced as his body was transformed and improved. Now, once he focused his attention on something, his brain would automatically gather information from his surroundings. Sounds he didn't want to hear, things he didn't want to see, and things he didn't want to feel would all desperately drill into his brain. Suddenly opening his eyes, a red light flashed in Li Onping's eyes. He ended his handstand and stood up again to begin boxing. It was a very simple straight punch, hook punch, and swing punch. However, every time Li Onping lightly threw a punch, the wind from the punch would blow through the entire room and then hit the wall with a bang, causing him to not dare to throw a punch with all his strength. He didn't have extravagant hopes that these movements could increase his strength. He just wanted to control his strength too well. The sudden increase in strength after eating Kano made him somewhat unaccustomed. It was also possible that he simply wanted to find something to do to distract his brain's attention. If he really wanted to train, he would prefer to go to the desolate outskirts like before, where he could let loose. There were more than 100 souls in his body waiting to be used. However, there were more things to do in Jadeite City recently, so he could only stay in the city for the time being. And his current goal was to become stronger, to make his strength stronger and stronger, to be able to completely carry out his own will. His second goal was to clean up Jadeite City properly. He really couldn't stand this city of sin anymore. If it were him in the past, he was afraid that if he knew the situation here, he could only curse a little and endure it in his heart. But it was different now. He could do things according to his own ideas. And in the process of cleaning up Jadeite City, he could also absorb more souls and become stronger. Moreover, this way, he could avoid direct confrontation with the country, and it would not be easy to expose his ability to absorb human souls to become stronger. Li Onping's own true ability, before confirming that he could at least confront a country head-on, he absolutely would not expose it. After punching, Li Onping flipped open the newspaper and read it again. Then, he wrote down all the people he needed to kill or capture, sent them to Li Qian, and then prepared to deal with the aftermath. Li Onping was like a hunter. The difference was that he determined the target through the newspaper in his hand. Li Onping turned on the computer and started surfing the internet. Apart from the newspaper, there would also be a lot of things that could not be seen in the newspaper on blogs and forums online. Once Li Onping noticed it, he would get Li Qian to investigate it. In the end, not long after he went online, a TXT file suddenly popped up in the center of the computer screen. Another line of words popped up. "Hello, is this Li Onping?" Li Onping squinted his eyes and carefully sensed. After listening for a while, he found that there was no ambush nearby. He took out his phone and was about to dial Li Qian's number. In the end, after thinking about it, he put the phone back and put his hands on the keyboard. "It's me. Who are you?" "Hello, Mr. Li. Forgive me for not being able to tell you my identity. Because your power is too strong, I still have to be careful. When I confirm that you are no longer hostile to us, I will tell you my identity. Why are you looking for me? I am here to express my goodwill. If you open the door now, you will see a gift that we have prepared for you." Li Onping turned his head to look at the door, but did not feel anything outside. He stood up and opened the door directly. He saw a rectangular box lying quietly at the door. He took the box back and placed it on the computer table. Li Onping thought about it and decided to open the box. After all, even if it was a bomb, he would not die. Opening the outermost paper box, there was an antique wooden box inside. Li Onping opened the box and saw a quaint long sword fixed in the box. The sword was 1:2:1, 3 meters long, about 3 to 2 fingers wide, with a slight curve. The layers of patterns on the blade showed superb forging skills. This was a good sword. Even a layman like Li Onping could tell at a glance. At this time, another line of words popped up on the computer screen. "You can hold the hilt tightly. It will show its true form." Hearing this, Li Onping grabbed the hilt with his right hand and lifted the sword. Then he exerted a little force. Buzz! He was like a dragon that had just awoken. The entire sword emitted a faint red light. With Li Onping's extraordinary sense of touch and vision, he could feel that the entire sword was vibrating at a high frequency. At the same time, another line of words appeared on the computer screen. This is the latest high-frequency knife. It uses our latest super elastic material. The entire shape is perfectly in line with the mechanical design of slashing, chopping, and other movements. The hilt is designed with a pressure sensing system and a palm print detection system. It will automatically record the first user's palm print. Only when the user grasps the hilt and generates a grip force of more than 10 kilograms, the entire sword will vibrate at a frequency of more than 20,000 times per second. It can easily cut through most materials. Li Onping's face showed appreciation. He gently slid the high-frequency knife across the floor. He did not feel any resistance at all and cut a hole in the wooden floor under his feet. It felt like cutting a piece of tofu. Li Onping smiled and sat back in his seat. I like this gift very much, but you better not add any disgusting gadgets on it. Please rest assured, this is only a token of our goodwill. We definitely did not do anything to this sword. Then, the TXT text disappeared. Seeing Li Onping's expression of fondness on the screen, Jennifer breathed a sigh of relief. This was the best gift she could give within her authority. This Murasima blade hadn't even been fully used inside Violet. After all, although it was indestructible, it was only suitable for close combat. It had a small range of application and was expensive to make. A few minutes later, Li Onping turned off the computer, and Jennifer could no longer observe him through the camera on the computer screen. But at least it was a good start, Jennifer thought. Next, she just needed to communicate more and slowly increase Li Onping's affection. Chapter 67. The next day, Li Qian parked her car on the side of the street. After a while, she saw Li Onping walking over from a distance. He tossed a rectangular package to Li Qian. "What is it?" asked Li Qian. "Someone gave me a high-frequency knife. Help me check if there's anything inside." Li Qian said in surprise, "High-frequency knife? Can this thing be carried around so casually? Who gave it to you?" Although she did not know much about the current technological development of Dexia's military, she was under the impression that high-frequency knives were mostly used for industrial and medical purposes. They were not yet mass-produced or miniaturized. "I don't know. There shouldn't be any tampering. However, you should still take it and check it out. That way, I'll feel more at ease using it." Li Qian nodded her head to indicate that she understood. Li Onping, who was beside her, added, "Don't let anyone else know about it." "I understand." Li Qian then took out a folder and handed it to Li Onping. "This is what you wanted to check. It's information on Z Luolan, Loyalty Hall, and the Kirin Group. It took me quite a bit of effort to find it." Although Li Qian's ability was excellent, this kind of real-time monitoring was mainly focused on current matters. She knew very little about what the three major organizations had done in the past. The information and evidence in this regard were all hidden by the police officers who had colluded with the three major organizations in the past. After all, in the past, even if the evidence was sent to the police station in Jadeite City, it might be sent back to the table of the Triad bosses the next day. Li Onping nodded his head. He opened the folder and began to read it. Li Qian, who was beside him, started the car and drove into the traffic. She carefully glanced at Li Onping. She had already read up on the information regarding the three major organizations. Apart from the Hall of Loyalty and the Qilin Group, both Feng Qi and Lu Xian were already qualified to be called scum. Lu Xian was a veteran local gangster. Fraud, extortion, and robbery were child's play. Even his daughter-in-law was snatched away. Otherwise, why would a beautiful university student from a famous brand marry an idiot with an IQ of less than 80? As for Feng Qi, he should have a deep relationship with the 100 Moon royal family. He was arrogant and domineering to the extreme. The entire Qilin Group was a warmonger. Over the past year since he came to Jadeite City, he had already caused 142 casualties. Not to mention the fact that they used to rent girls from Lone Wolf as comfort women. Sure enough, when Li Qian was secretly sizing up Li Anping, she found that the other party's frown was getting deeper and deeper. As if she felt Li Anping's anger, Li Qian couldn't help but swallow her saliva quietly. The car also unconsciously slowed down. After a long time, Li Anping put the documents back into the folder. His expression was calm, and no one could tell if he was happy or angry. Li Qian subconsciously lowered her voice and wanted to say something, but Li Anping beat her to it. No need to say anything. I'll go look for them tonight. I don't care about the lackeys at the bottom of the loyalty hall, but I won't let go of anyone who deserves to die in this file. Li Qian didn't pity those scum, but for Li Anping's safety, she had to consider Xia Dragonfinch's position in this regard. So she didn't try to persuade Li Anping to change his decision, but instead directly asked, "Then what about Xia Laikong? Give him a call." Li Anping still decided to talk to Xia Laikong. If the other party didn't lie to him last time, and that clone really only had an eighth of his strength, then he didn't have absolute confidence in winning against Xia Laikong at full strength. And Xia Dragonfinch had at least 2 or 3 experts of this level. The call went through. "Hello? You're looking for me?" Xia Yekong's tone didn't sound like he was in a good mood. "It just so happens that I have something to talk to you about. Next week, come to Tianjing." Li Anping took the phone. "Let's talk about going to Tianjing later. I have something to tell you right now. I'll go out tonight. The Qilin group will all die. Over at the Loyalty Hall, people like Lu Xian will also die." A deathly silence came from the other end of the phone. When he spoke again, Xia Yekong's words were already filled with coldness. "Do you know what it means to look at the big picture? With the current situation, I don't want to see any chaos in the south. Once the upper echelon of the Loyalty Hall is killed, then what will happen if his 100,000 lackeys take the opportunity to cause trouble? Do you know how many pairs of eyes are watching to Xia? As for the Qilin group, I can allow you to kill them all, but Fang Qi must stay. He has the blood of the 100 Moons Empire. I don't want to give the 100 Moons Empire an excuse to meddle in Jadeite City's affairs at this time. When the time comes for a war on 2 fronts, even Xia Dragonfinch will find it hard to bear. Bad people must be punished for doing bad things. And these scum, their punishment is the death penalty, which I will personally carry out." Li Anping said word by word, "I'm not interested in the big picture you speak of. If I knew what they did earlier, I would have killed them all when I killed Kanoa. Because every extra minute they live is a great danger to others." "You," Xia Laikong said angrily, "do you think you're acting? Or a comic? Do you think you're a superhero? The reality isn't that simple. Do you think you're a good person because you killed Lu Xian? Is that right? Have you ever thought about Lu Xian's parents? What about his children? Have you ever thought that after he died, the Loyalty Hall would be in chaos? His lackeys would cause trouble. What would happen to those innocents who were harmed? Also, is everyone in the Loyalty Hall a bad person? Those accountants, drivers, cleaners, security guards who work for him, those ordinary people who lost their jobs because of you, how would they support their families? How would they make a living? And on Fang Qi's side, what if the dozen or so small countries in the south are all staring at us? Usually, they lie in front of us like dogs, but now that we're fighting with the ice fortress, it'll be good if they don't drag us down. If you kill Fang Qi, won't you give Baiyu an excuse to intervene? Once Baiyu intervenes, the other flans and Inshu will all come up to take a bite. Then the whole de Xia will be covered in war. If the situation deteriorates like this, do you know how many people will die? Li Anping, let me tell you, it's not that I don't want Fang Qi to die. It's not that I want to support the Loyalty Hall, but they must be stable now. Once the ice fortress retreats, I promise you, they will be destroyed immediately." After saying this, Xia Laikong sighed. If Li Anping still didn't change his mind after saying so much, then there was nothing he could do. Let's do what needs to be done. Xia Laikong quietly waited for Li Anping's answer. Finally, the other side spoke. When people do evil, the consequences of their evil deeds are not a reason for us to condone them. Those who want to start a war, those who want to cause trouble, they're the ones in the wrong. We shouldn't let the good people pay the price because of their threats, and let the citizens of Jadeite City be constantly threatened by the Qilin Regiment and the Loyalty Hall. Li Onping continued, "This matter is not negotiable. Do you think that just because of the other side's background, they can be allowed to do evil?" "You bastard," Xiao Likong said angrily, but then he said, "I've lost to you. So how about this? You can kill whoever you want, but the loyalty hall can't fall into chaos. Let our people take over. Don't worry, we'll guide him in the right direction. As for Feng Qi, at least spare his life. He's useful to us." "Okay," Li Onping replied after some thought. "Then it's a deal." After hanging up the phone, someone beside Xia Likong let out a chuckle. It came from a landline. "Old Xia, it's not like you to be so polite. He won't accept your kindness. Is it worth it? For this Li Onping, Song Bang is pushing his luck." It was the flying general's voice. "He's very outstanding and has great potential. Moreover, he doesn't fear authority, and he has the strength to support him." As for the old man, Xiao Likong laughed. "It's fine. He wants the authority to command the north, right? Just give it to him. But he keeps inserting his own people into the army. That's not very good. There's still a year before the imperial selection begins. The royal clans have already begun to move. It seems like Song Bang wants to support his son to take the throne. The other 8 royal clans aren't to be trifled with. The Song clan won't be able to take the throne so easily. Does he really think that it's so easy to be the emperor?" On the other side, after Li Onping hung up, he asked Li Qian to stop the car. He didn't get out of the car and just looked at the roadside. Li Qian was a little curious. Following his gaze, she saw a burly man with a scar on his face beating up a young man. In the restaurant, Giant Bear punched a waiter to the ground. Then he pointed at the people around him and said lazily, "What? You're not convinced? Let me tell you, if you don't pay the management fee today, don't even think about continuing to operate your restaurant." "But you just came to collect the management fee yesterday," a fat female cashier said fearfully. Giant Bear looked at her and laughed. He walked to the woman step by step. Seeing as she lowered her head and didn't dare to look at him directly, he slapped the woman's head. "You paid it, right?" Slap, slap, slap. He slapped the woman's face again and again as he asked, "You paid it, right? We came to collect the management fee yesterday, right? You didn't pay it, right?" The female cashier cried and said, You didn't pay the management fee." The people around looked at Giant Bear angrily. They clenched their fists, but no one came forward. Regardless of whether it was the other party's scar, size, or the fierce reputation of the Qilin group, they all scattered their courage. Seeing that his threat was effective, Giant Bear laughed and walked to the door. "There will be people coming to collect it tomorrow. If you still drag it out and don't pay it, I don't know what will happen." After saying that, Giant Bear laughed maniacally and walked out. He felt very comfortable in his heart. Originally, this kind of business of collecting protection fees was not something that a high-ranking person like him could do. However, this kind of freeloading was what Giant Bear liked the most. In the past, when he was a mercenary in the South, money was earned by risking his life. How could it be as comfortable as here in Jadeite City? There were so many weak chickens and sheep that he could casually squeeze money out of their hands. Suddenly, Giant Bear stopped in his tracks and looked in Li Onping's direction. When he saw Li Onping and Li Qian sitting in the car, he grinned and walked towards them. Giant Bear knocked on the window in front of Li Onping and saw that the other party didn't open the window. He didn't think much of it. Glancing at Li Qian in the driver's seat, Giant Bear said to Li Onping, "I know you can hear. Tell your girlfriend that we've caught so many people in the past 2 days. It's enough. Don't poke your nose into other people's business. Otherwise, if anything happens, we won't be responsible." Li Onping didn't answer him, but Giant Bear saw the other party's trembling shoulders, frightened eyes, and pale face, revealing an interesting expression. If this was the battlefield in the South, he might not be able to resist the urge to grab this pretty boy and stab him a few times. Giant Bear finally gave Li Onping the middle finger and left. But who knew that after he took 2 steps, he felt a palm full of strength grab his neck from behind, making him unable to move. Let's start with you. Chapter 68. The giant bear did not have the time to think about who had attacked him. nor did he have the time to think about why the other party was so strong. He let out an angry roar subconsciously. However, his angry roar turned into a blood-curdling scream halfway through. His spine had been broken by the other party. All the citizens on the street looked at the two of them in shock, especially the people in the shops that had been extorted by the giant bear earlier. They all stood up and looked at the giant bear in Li Onping's hands. Li Onping ignored them. He grabbed the giant bear's neck with one hand and turned his head around. It was as if he was holding a disobedient puppy that had pooped all over the place. He revealed a disgusted expression. "Don't do it here. Take him away," Li Qian said as she sat in the car. The giant bear was still in a daze. Wasn't this gigolo a level 1 ability user? Why was he so strong? Why couldn't he even withstand one attack from him? However, the steel-like hand on his neck reminded him that this was not a dream. A huge force was pressing down on his neck, as if it could break his neck at any moment. Fang Xingjian's strength was far beyond his imagination. Moreover, he had wanted to kill this person earlier. I actually provoked such a monster earlier. A layer of cold sweat covered the giant bear's back. He opened his mouth and said, "Sir, I think there's some misunderstanding between us. Please accept my most sincere apology. Gold, weapons, treasures, no matter what it is, I'm willing to compensate you." Li Onping ignored him completely and dragged him into the back seat of the car. His hand never left the giant bear's neck. "I really didn't know that you were so strong. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have dared to find trouble with you, even if I had 100 guts. Miss Li, you know that we don't have any bad intentions. We've also cooperated fully with our brothers who were taken away these few days. I was just casually saying it." As the car drove off, the giant bear continued to plead for mercy. However, other than him, neither Li Qian nor Li Onping said anything. It was not until 10 minutes later that Li Onping asked, "You've killed a lot of people in Xia, right? I heard that you once burned a family of 4 to death when you were collecting debts." Giant Bear hesitated and said, Giant Bear didn't expect the other party to suddenly ask about this. For a moment, he didn't know whether to confess or deny it. However, he knew that no matter which one he chose, he had to be quick. Hesitation would only arouse suspicion. Thinking of the other party's strength and the background of Li Qian and Xia Dragonfinch, he gritted his teeth and said, "Yes, I did it. At that time, we had just arrived at Jadeite City, so we had to be ruthless and establish our dominance." Establishing dominance. Li Onping sneered and said no more. The giant bear also felt a terrifying pressure slowly emanating from Li Onping's body. No matter how he begged for mercy, Li Onping did not reply. His heart gradually sank. Just as Li Onping took the giant bear away, on the roof of a building 500 meters away, a man wearing a black windbreaker that covered most of his body was quietly looking in the direction Li Onping left. Streaks of green light continuously flashed through his eyes. Upon closer inspection, it seemed as if countless numbers of data were flowing through them. The man muttered to himself, "According to the data in the database, the giant bear's ability is to expand his body. A level 2 ability user who wants to pinch his neck and make him unable to resist at all would have to have a grip strength of at least 200 kilograms. This Li Onping's strength is very strong, and his attack speed is also very fast." His eyes replayed the scene of Li Onping's hand grabbing the giant bear's neck. Ordinary people's eyes couldn't catch the movement at all, but in his electronic eyes, it was slowed down by 2 times, 4 times, and gradually the trajectory of Li Onping's hand appeared. His punching speed is about 150 meters per second. Not bad. The man continuously analyzed Li Onping's data, at the same time thinking about the purpose of his trip. However, if he knew that Li Onping's attack just now was just a casual one, not even using a tenth of his strength, who knew what he would think? This kind of strength is enough to make a living in Jadeite City. No wonder Jennifer still wants to use conciliatory means. The man's gaze was fixed on Li Onping in the traffic, and he chuckled. But she's been in Jadeite City for too long and has become timid. When did our company start doing this? At this moment, the pager in the man's ear rang. "Tom, You're in Jadeite City? The man said in surprise. Jennifer? I didn't expect you to be so well informed. Tom, I don't know if you're here for the experimental target, but if you are, don't use force. The opponent is very strong, and I've already made a good impression on him. Next, we just need to... Sorry, I'll be in charge of this matter from now on. Just wait for the news. Tom didn't listen to Jennifer's next words. Instead, he directly said one sentence and turned off the communication. Then, after watching Lianping's car leave his sight, Tom turned around and walked toward the stairs. On his retina, a piece of information appeared. On it was the address of Lianping's current residence. Meanwhile, in Fangqi's villa, it was very lively this afternoon. That was because the current boss of Loyalty Hall, Lu Xian, had secretly brought his subordinates here. After some exchanges and threats, in the face of the Qilin group's strength that far exceeded his own, for the sake of his wealth and life, Lu Xian could only choose to compromise. On the second floor of the villa, Lu Xian bowed his head to Fangqi in front of the higher-ups of the Qilin group. In the face of Lu Xian's attitude, Fangqi just smiled and said, "You're much smarter than your nephew. Stay for dinner tonight." Everyone present understood that the situation was already clear after the big battle, because even the special task force couldn't stop Fangqi in time. However, it wasn't until now that Lu Xian bowed his head in front of them that the Qilin group's position in Jadeite City was truly established. This was probably the beginning of a change in Jadeite City. After a while, the news of the giant bear being captured reached Fangqi's ears at the fastest speed. Giant bear was captured by Li Qian. Fangqi looked at the somewhat nervous hedgehog in front of him in puzzlement. While knocking on the table in front of him, he asked, "Didn't I tell you to keep an eye on him and not let him cause trouble? What's going on?" Facing Fangqi, who had almost unified the Jadeite City, Hedgehog had become more and more respectful during this time. I heard from a few of my brothers that he was dragged into a car when he went to collect protection fees alone in the morning. Hedgehog paused and looked at Fangqi's face before carefully saying, "Just now, a brother found Giant Bear's body. All the bones in his body were broken." With a cracking sound, a large crack appeared on the table in front of Fangqi. Fangqi narrowed his eyes and asked, "Who did it?" "It should be Li Qian's men. Someone saw Qin Yang's group throw Giant Bear's body out." Fangqi exhaled and said slowly, "The person I asked you to investigate last time, have you figured out?" "No," Hedgehog said. "I only know that he often follows Li Qian, but he shouldn't be a member of the Special Task Force. I heard that Li Qian specially called Qin Yang's group over to protect this man." "Humph. So this man is very important to Li Qian?" Fangqi said coldly. "Giant Bear is a veteran of our regiment. I can't let him die in vain." Hedgehog advised, "But Li Qian is a member of the Special Task Force. After all, she's the Xia Dragonfinch's man." "What if? Then let's deal with that man. I only want one of his legs. Let that little girl know that she can't bully me just because she's wearing that skin." Seeing that Hedgehog still wanted to persuade him, Fangqi said decisively, "Hedgehog, we're outlaws now. We're people who put our lives on the line. We want to go back to 100 Moons and take back everything that belongs to us. We have to be ruthless. We have to make everyone who notices us afraid, so afraid that they can't help but tremble at the thought of dealing with us. Do you understand?" Hedgehog nodded helplessly and said, "I understand." After saying that, Fangqi seemed to recall the last time he had met Lianping. His arrogant eyes and calm facade. He added, "Then you and Lei Jiao will handle this matter. That kid is also an ability user. You two be careful and don't fail miserably. Also, don't hurt the other members of the Special Task Force. When I said one leg, it's one leg. I don't want more, and I don't want less either." "I understand." Hedgehog could only agree. Although he knew that casually crippling one of Li Qian's men like this would definitely infuriate her. But Fangqi was right. Now that the Hall of Loyalty had joined the Qilin Order, it was time to strike back and let that damn girl know what's good for her. And so, that night, Fangqi entertained Lu Xian's group in the villa, while Hedgehog and Lei Jiao rushed to Li Anping's residence. Chapter 69. Hedgehog and Lei Jiao stood at the entrance of an alley. From time to time, they would glance at an apartment across the alley. "Are you sure it's here?" Lei Jiao asked in a low voice. "Of course. It's such a simple thing. Do you think I would make a mistake? It's in 606. He lives alone." Lei Jiao nodded. "I'm just confirming. Then I'll go over. You wait for me here." Hedgehog grunted. When he looked at Lei Jiao again, he had already disappeared. Hedgehog muttered, "Sneaky guy." Although he said that, Hedgehog still had a lot of faith in Lei Jiao's strength. As the only level 3 ability user in the Qilin group aside from Feng Qi, Lei Jiao's speed was even higher than Feng Qi's. In addition, he was cautious, careful, and had excellent infiltration skills. He had always been the assassin and spy master of the Qilin group. Even Giant Bear, who had always been at odds with Lei Jiao, couldn't help but admire him in this aspect. Hedgehog wasn't worried about letting Lei Jiao deal with a level 1 ability user. The only thing he needed to be on guard against was to not cause trouble. Just as he was thinking this, Hedgehog saw Qin Yong and 2 subordinates. He didn't know when, but they had come from the other side of the street. They were heading towards Li Anping's apartment. "Damn it, don't they only follow us when we go out?" Hedgehog cursed. He wasn't worried that they would hinder Lei Jiao. Instead, he was worried that Lei Jiao might accidentally injure them. After all, he was a member of the Special Task Force. Once he was killed, it would be tantamount to shedding all pretense of cordiality. And if Qin Yong and the others found out that Lei Jiao wanted to cripple Li Anping, they would obviously stop him. Bad luck. Hedgehog's eyes turned. No one knew what he was thinking. On the other side, Qin Yong and the other 2 slowly walked. They were still wearing their uniforms. Qin Yong, who was in the lead, was carrying a rectangular box. No one knew what was inside. The 2 subordinates were also very curious. They couldn't help but ask, "Boss, what's inside?" "I don't know. Officer Li told me to bring it to Li Anping." Qin Yong shook his head. "He also told me to tell him that there's no problem." That monster! When Li Anping was mentioned, the other 2's expressions clearly became uneasy. During this period of time, he followed behind Li Qian and Li Anping. On the surface, it looked like he was protecting them, but in fact, he was helping Li Anping to clean up. In less than a week, they had seen more corpses than they had seen in decades. Although they were all people who deserved to die, seeing Li Anping kill people so cruelly as former members of the police force, they were clearly not used to it. At this moment, one of them suddenly pointed to the front and said, "Who is that?" Hedgehog stepped out of the alleyway, chuckling as he walked towards Qin Yong's group. In these troubled times, the other party's strange behavior obviously aroused the vigilance of Qin Yong and the others. The 3 of them reached for the pistols on their waists and asked loudly, "Who are you? Stop or we'll shoot." Hedgehog didn't pay any attention to the 3 of them. Instead, he quickened his pace and walked towards them. "Did you hear that? We told you to stop." The 2 men behind Qin Yong raised their guns and aimed at the hedgehog. "If you don't stop, we'll shoot." However, the hedgehog's footsteps didn't change, and the 2 men who raised their guns felt a sharp pain in their heads. It was as if their brains had been pierced by an invisible needle. The intense pain caused the 2 men to fall to the ground and cry out in pain. "What did you do?" Qin Yong saw this and immediately pulled out his gun and aimed at Hedgehog. During this period of time, they had been following Li Qian and Li Anping, and because they had already joined the Secret Service, they slowly learned that ability users were monsters. The man in front of them was obviously an unknown ability user, and he was attacking them. Thinking of this, Qin Yong subconsciously wanted to shoot. Who knew that in the next moment, he felt as if a very long silver needle had pierced his brain. The kind of bone-deep pain made him want to hold his head and roll on the ground. But he didn't fall down. He struggled to half-kneel on the ground, raised his gun shakily, and shot at Hedgehog. Bang! Bang! 2 shots in a row, both missed. The intense pain in his brain made it impossible for him to concentrate on shooting. Hedgehog looked at Qin Yong in surprise. For an ordinary person, your willpower is really strong. Hedgehog's ability was called mental piercing. He could use his mental power to pierce his opponent's brain like a needle. An ordinary person would have fainted from the pain alone. But once a person's brain was pierced by Hedgehog's ability multiple times, they would become an idiot or even brain dead. Hedgehog had used this ability countless times to kill people without leaving a trace. Only strong willpower and mental power could be immune to his ability. He looked at Qin Yong with appreciation, but the next second, he shook his head and said, "Unfortunately, you chose the wrong path. The difference between ability users and ordinary people can't be made up with willpower." The three men in front of him had no strength to resist, and two of them had already fainted. Although Qin Yong was still conscious, he had no strength to resist. Hedgehog didn't plan to use mental piercing on Qin Yong again. It might cause irreversible damage to him. He planned to directly walk up and knock him out. However, as soon as he took a step forward, a loud bang rang out from behind him. How could Lei Jiao be so careless to create such a big commotion? Thinking of this, Hedgehog quickly turned his head and looked in the direction of Li Anping's apartment. The entire wall outside Li Anping's apartment had been blasted open. Amidst the explosion, bricks, cement, smoke, dust, and many small fragments, as well as scattered wires and water pipes, shot out in all directions toward the street. As the wall was blasted open, a figure flew out from a wall. In midair, the figure's limbs moved as if he wanted to grab onto something. However, the force that blasted him out was too great. In less than 1/10 of a second, he was smashed onto the cement road by the force. Boom! Amidst the loud noise, the figure crashed into the ground. The layers of cement were shattered, revealing cracks, and the place where the figure was standing slightly caved in, forming a small pit. Hedgehog's heart sank. He looked at the figure that was no longer moving, and his face immediately turned pale. The person who had been thrown out was Lei Jiao. Lying on the ground, he had stopped breathing. His entire head was covered in blood, and blood continued to bubble out from the corners of his mouth. His right leg had been twisted into a fried dough twist. Lei Jiao's left leg had been crushed into a flat piece, as if it had been crushed by a road roller. The other party had obviously grabbed Lei Jiao's left leg and thrown him out. The huge force had directly blasted the wall open. Then, in the next moment, Hedgehog felt that he had been targeted. It was like a frog staring at a fly, or a tiger staring at a rabbit. It was the feeling of being targeted by one's natural enemy and being targeted like a fish on a chopping block. It was a feeling that Hedgehog had never felt before. Hedgehog swallowed a mouthful of saliva and wanted to move his feet, but he realized that he was being stared at by the other party. He didn't dare to move his legs at all. He could only slowly move his head inch by inch and look at the place where the wall had been blasted open. Then, he saw Li Anping standing there. He looked gentle, slender, and fit. Coupled with his white sportswear, he looked like a college student. However, the blood on his body was still flowing, and there was even blood dripping from his hair drop by drop. Looking at Li Anping's teasing eyes, Hedgehog only felt that it was funny. He actually wanted to cripple one of the legs of such a devil king. Compared to what the other party had done to Lei Jiao, his actions were like child's play. "Can you?" Hedgehog mustered up his courage and wanted to say something. However, Li Anping just shook his head. "No, you all have to die. Think of some last words. You can't ignore the rules. Our leader has already unified the entire Jade City. I know Lei Jiao was wrong, but we didn't want her life. You've already crossed the line by killing him. If you kill me again, our leader won't let you go." However, Li Anping just shook his head and looked at Hedgehog mockingly. It was as if he was looking at a pig that knew it was about to be slaughtered and was struggling desperately in the pigsty. Hedgehog clenched his fists and stared at Li Anping unwillingly. "Ah!" He suddenly roared angrily. His mental energy turned into a long needle and stabbed toward the other party fiercely. Hedgehog's attack method was very special. Even if it was a level 3 or 4 expert, if they were not prepared in advance and were suddenly hit, they would not feel good. At the very least, they would be stunned for a few seconds. And these few seconds were the time Hedgehog had left for himself to escape. No matter what, I have to give it a try. Thinking of this, Hedgehog used all his strength. The long needle formed by his mental energy could even be seen with the naked eye. It shot toward Li Onping like a laser and drilled into his brain. However, what appeared before Hedgehog's eyes was an even more despairing reality. What is this thing? How can a human have such a mental energy? Devil. This guy is a devil. After the long needle of mental energy drilled into Li Onping's brain, there was no reaction. Hedgehog felt as if his mental energy had pierced into an infinitely vast space. It was a vortex of death. This place was filled with death, pain, and despair. He saw countless people's souls wandering in this world. They were constantly tortured, imprisoned, and then repeatedly killed or even devoured. Everywhere he looked, it was hell. The long needle of mental energy was not stopped or even defended against. If Hedgehog felt that his mental energy was a small stream, then the other party was like the combined mental energy of countless people. It was simply like a world. Using a small stream to attack a world? No, he couldn't even get a response from the other party. It was like a drop of water entering the sea. His mental energy piercing was completely ineffective. Hedgehog even suspected that his mental attacks were ineffective against the man in front of him. Li Onping did not feel that he was being attacked. He only heard Hedgehog roar and then stared at him motionlessly. However, the attack that he imagined did not come. Li Onping impatiently glanced at Hedgehog, who was still staring at him in a daze. Therefore, he jumped out and appeared in front of Hedgehog. Seeing that the other party still did not react, he directly punched Hedgehog's head and smashed it into pieces. Then Li Onping looked at Qin Yong, who had collapsed to the ground, and called Li Qian. Then he ordered, "Send someone to clean up this place. I'll go to Feng Qi's villa first. After cleaning up here, come and find me together." Chapter 70. Above the building, Li Onping's body had already crossed a distance of over 100 meters with a single leap. He jumped from the roof of one building to the roof of another. After leaving the city center, Li Onping moved through alleys, small buildings, and shadows. His movements were quick and stealthy. After only half an hour, Li Onping had already reached the outskirts of the city. If he continued forward, he would need to run along the mountain road for another half an hour before reaching Feng Qi's villa. However, what Li Onping did not know was that, right outside Feng Qi's villa, Tom was using a spy satellite to track Li Onping's whereabouts. So, he's going to come here next? Tom muttered to himself. This guy's bloodlust is really big. As an S-class destruction warrior within the Violet Society, Tom had the right to call upon the local Violet Society's long-range support at any time and place. Calling upon the spy satellite like this was done through a loophole in Dxia's satellite. Such a call would immediately be discovered by the Dxia authorities. In other words, in order to keep an eye on Li Onping, Tom had directly used a loophole in the satellite communication system. I hope you're really worth that much money. Tom opened a rectangular box in front of him. He took out the components from the box and began to assemble them. Faintly, it appeared to be a sniper rifle over 2 meters in length. At the same time, in the hall on the first floor of Feng Qi's villa, over 10 people were sitting around the dining table and eating. The scene was lively and orderly. Feng Qi sat on the main seat and ate silently. He was indifferent to the lights on the table. Although several of his subordinates were trying their best to make fun of him in an attempt to liven up the atmosphere, it was to no avail. Suddenly, Feng Qi raised his wine glass and gave a toast to the person beside him. "Old Lu, I'm sorry. The atmosphere today is not very good. I've neglected you." The person addressed as Old Lu was the current boss of Loyalty Hall, Lu Xian. He was already over 60 years old. Although his body was in good health, most of his hair had turned white. Seeing Feng Qi giving him a toast, he said with a respectful expression, "Sigh, young Master Qi, you are too courteous. Today we have joined the Qilin Guild. Brother Xiong is one of us, my brother. Now that something has happened to him, to be honest, I am not in the mood to eat. Young Master Qi, do you want me to send a few men over?" Lu Xian made a chopping motion. When facing Feng Qi, Lu Xian, who was only a level 1 ability user, was completely lacking in confidence. Originally, he wanted to rely on Han Wei of the Special Task Force, But in the end, Han Wei was taken away, and the higher-ups sent an ignorant little girl. How could he control the situation? Lucien thought about it and decided to vote for Fang Qi. According to his estimation, after a few months, that girl would either be transferred away or give in to them after being snubbed in Jadeite City. If he was transferred away, then if the new captain was capable, he would betray Fang Qi. At that time, the other party wouldn't dare to do anything to him. After all, the entire Zhongyi Hall had more than 100,000 subordinates. He didn't believe that the higher-ups would dare to casually deal with him. However, in the face of a powerful desperado like Fang Qi, he still planned to give in. After all, the other party's battle record of killing Lu Jun and the other 4 people was too shocking. His strength could be said to be unfathomable. Therefore, Lucien had been keeping a low profile for the entire afternoon. He believed that before Fang Qi completely took over the Zhongyi Hall, he would definitely not make things difficult for him. As expected, Fang Qi smiled and patted Lucien's shoulder, saying gently, "There's no need to trouble the brothers. I've already sent Hedgehog and Thunder Jiao to handle this matter." Fang Qi lowered his head and looked at his watch, saying they should be arriving soon. Thinking of this, Fang Qi revealed a mysterious smile. He looked at Lucien and said, "Today, you'll have to eat and drink well. I know that old Lu likes young girls. There'll be a mysterious program after the meal." "Ha! Then I'll have to thank young Master Qi." Hearing this, Lucien smiled lecherously. Half an hour later, Lucien burped as he was helped up to his room upstairs. The subordinates he had brought with him were all guarding downstairs. After opening the door, he sent the servants away and then walked into the bedroom with a look of anticipation. The entire bedroom was enveloped by a pink light. On the big bed in the middle of the bedroom, a person was lying there covered by a blanket. From the back, the person's figure looked very petite. Lucien licked his lips and stretched out his hand to pull the blanket away. A girl who was still sleeping soundly appeared before him. The girl was not even 2 meters tall, and her face looked unbelievably tender. She was probably not even 10 years old and was still wearing the school uniform of an elementary school student. Lucien was old enough to be her grandfather. When Lucien saw the girl who was still sleeping soundly, his eyes lit up and he revealed a satisfied smile. Even the age spots on his cheeks were squeezed together. He put his head in front of the girl and opened his nostrils, greedily inhaling the girl's scent. It wasn't easy. Now that Lone Wolf is gone, I can't even get a bite of this. I wonder where the Qilin Guild managed to catch such a great specimen. Thinking of this, Lucien could not wait to take off his clothes and throw them on the ground, revealing his skinny body. However, just as he was about to take off his pants, a scream pierced through the night sky. "What's going on?" Lucien looked at the girl on the bed and hesitated. However, the next moment, a series of screams mixed with gunshots woke up the entire villa. Enemy attack. In the east. Everyone, bring your guns. Lucien quickly put on his clothes again and ran downstairs. Seeing his subordinates running over, he asked anxiously, "What's going on? Who barged in?" "I don't know. It seems like the police are here." Amidst the chaos, Fang Qi walked out, waved his hand, and shouted, "Everyone, pick up your guns and kill your way out. If you see anyone you don't know, just shoot. I don't want anyone alive." Fang Qi took the machine gun from his subordinate and rushed out with a black face. His subordinates in the other houses, as well as Lucien's group, also rushed out with him. However, wherever they passed by, other than seeing corpses all over the ground, they did not see any other enemies. However, the screams of his subordinates never stopped. Sometimes they would ring out in the east of the villa, and sometimes in the west. It was as if many people were attacking the villa at the same time. However, when Fang Qi and his men arrived, other than the corpses all over the ground, they did not see anyone else. "Motherf asterisk Kerr, it's an ability user," Fang Qi shouted angrily. "Everyone, follow me. Don't give him a chance to kill us one by one." Thus, 40 to 50 people huddled together and stood together in the garden of the villa. The group of people were like birds startled by the twang of a bow, raising their guns and aiming in all directions. Only ability users like Feng Qi and Lu Xian were able to maintain their composure. However, when Feng Qi saw that there were only a few dozen people left in the villa, he could not help but curse. After all the members of the Qilin group lived in this villa. Now, in a short span of 10 minutes, only a few dozen people were left. How could Feng Qi be so angry that his eyes were burning with anger? Mother of Asterisker, I'm going to tear this bastard into pieces. Feng Qi gritted his teeth and said, "You guys stay here. I'll go find him alone." No one disagreed. In a battle between high-level ability users, ordinary people or low-level ability users could only be a burden. With Feng Qi's skills, it was more powerful for him to deal with the enemy alone. Lu Xian even thought that if the opponent was smart enough, after killing so many people, he would retreat and escape when faced with Feng Qi alone. However, the opponent was obviously different from what he thought. Li Yonping barged in directly. When the guard asked him a question, he punched through the iron door and through the guard's chest. Then, the people patrolling nearby rushed over, but before they could even fire a shot, they were killed one by one. In the end, more people rushed over from the distance. Pistols, machine guns, rocket launchers. These were all used by the members of the Qilin group. After all, they were mercenaries who earned their living through war. In a short span of 3 minutes, they quickly reacted. Then, as if they had been fighting a war, they continuously attacked Li Yonping. Bullets came from all directions, but it was useless. The man in front of them was like a meat grinder, killing everyone he could see, not leaving a single one alive. Their eyes could see the slightest changes, and their ears could hear breathing, heartbeat, and the sound of reloading. So, whether they were hiding in the attic, standing on the roof, in the grass, or on the branches, no one could escape Li Yonping's killing. When Li Yonping slowly walked toward Feng Qi and the others in the garden, it meant that the only members of the Qilin group left in the villa were the people in front of him. Feng Qi saw Li Yonping walk over, and his face darkened. Good. I misjudged you. I didn't expect you to be an expert. Speaking of which, Thunder, Flood Dragon, and Hedgehog have already fallen into your ambush, right? Where's Li Qian? Where's he hiding? Tell him to come out and see me." Li Yonping looked at him as if he was looking at a dead man, and did not say a word. Instead, when he saw Lu Xian, he nodded and said, "Be careful. I don't want to kill you, so you'd better not resist later, lest I accidentally kill you." Seeing that he was completely ignored, Feng Qi laughed loudly 3 times, and pitch-black scales grew on his body. Streaks of electric light appeared, and his body expanded in an instant. His bulging muscles even burst his shirt. Black psychic energy emerged from his body, and the people around him could not withstand the immense pressure. They could not help but retreat, creating an empty space around Feng Qi. His scale-covered head looked extremely ferocious. Feng Qi, who had transformed into a monster, roared fiercely, "I'll kill you first, then I'll go catch that girly Qian." Chapter 71. Just as Feng Qi's transformation attracted all of Li Yonping's attention, on the cliff 1,000 meters away, Tom looked at Li Yonping through the scope. He revealed a proud smile and slowly pulled the trigger. In less than a second, the bullet hit Li Yonping's body with tremendous kinetic energy. It was unknown what kind of gun Tom was using, but the bullet was very thin, fast, and had a strong penetrative ability. Feng Qi and the others, who were standing nearby, did not even notice that in that 1 second, Li Yonping's lung had a small hole pierced through it. This was a sniper rifle that was specially used for assassination and infiltration. Li Yonping felt a tightness in his chest and could not help but take a step forward. Feeling that his lung had been pierced through, he immediately turned his head and looked furiously in the direction where the bullet had come from. Narrowing his eyes slightly, he was able to see clearly the scene 1,000 meters away. He happened to see a blonde foreigner slowly putting away the sniper rifle in his hand. "Oomph." Li Yonping snorted coldly and no longer cared about Feng Qi and the others. With a leap, he flew out of the villa and dashed in Tom's direction. In his eyes, Fong Chi and the others could be killed at any time. However, if this foreigner who had launched a sneak attack on him were to escape, he would not be able to find him. Tom's electronic eyes narrowed and turned into a black. He could clearly see Li Anping, who was moving at high speed. When he saw that Li Anping was running toward him, he revealed a faint smile. He threw the sniper rifle on the ground and ran down the mountain. In the villa, Fong Chi looked at Li Anping, who was running outside, and bellowed furiously. "Do you think you can escape?" He took a step forward and crashed into the villa's wall. He broke through the wall and dashed out, chasing after Li Anping. "You won't be able to escape. Li Qian and you, none of you will be able to escape." Fong Chi's huge body was like a tank in the forest. Any stone or tree that appeared in front of him would be smashed to pieces by him. However, although Fong Chi was running with all his might, Li Anping was gradually turning into a black in his eyes and was about to disappear. "Don't even think of leaving." All of a sudden, Fong Chi shot out electric light in all directions. As the electric current stimulated his muscles and nerves, his speed increased by another level. But Li Anping, who was in front of him, suddenly jumped off a cliff. Flustered and exasperated, Fong Chi chased him to the cliff, but there was no trace of Li Anping in the vast sea of trees. "I'll definitely find you," he cried, unwilling to give up. After thinking for a while, he had no choice but to take a detour from the other side and rush to the jungle below the cliff. Li Anping chased after Tom and jumped down. The two of them landed in the forest at the bottom of the cliff, but when Li Anping raised his head, the other person's figure was already gone. Li Anping touched his chest. The injury to his lungs had already healed. Then, the other party's voice rang out. "How is it? Do you feel some discomfort in your chest?" Originally I could have killed you with that shot, but my goal this time is to capture you alive. So I can only use some medicine. This is our newly developed anesthetic bomb. It can paralyze an elephant in 10 seconds. Li Anping looked in the direction of the voice and found that it seemed to have started to wander around. For a moment, he could not determine where the voice came from. "Haha, I know you're immune to poison, but this kind of medicine is meant to deal with powerful ability users. After entering the body, the medicine will directly affect the nerves, muscles, and brain. As long as you're still human and your ability hasn't reached level 5, it's impossible for you not to be paralyzed. Now, it should be about time, right?" Li Anping looked in the direction of the voice. Tom was slowly walking out. He had already taken off the outer clothes he was wearing. His entire body was wrapped in a thin layer of metal armor. It was obvious that he was a modified human like Jennifer's two subordinates. However, whether it was the black paint or the complicated patterns on the armor, they all showed that he was definitely not an ordinary modified human. Tom pulled out a high-frequency dagger from the armor plate on the outside of his thigh and slowly walked towards Li Anping. "Don't worry, I won't kill you yet. I'll just cut off your limbs first to ensure that you're no longer in danger. Then, I'll put you in a bag and send you back." As he walked, he used his mechanical eyes to scan Li Anping's motionless body over and over again. But suddenly he stopped in his tracks. "No, your body isn't paralyzed." Li Anping laughed. After his body evolved, it was no longer the structure of a human. His muscles were as strong as steel, his nerves were like steel wires inserted into his bones, and his brain could be reconstructed at any time with soul energy. No matter what, he was already developing in the direction of a monster. Anesthetics naturally had no effect on him. With a flash, he appeared in front of Tom and threw a punch at the other party's surprised face. However, Tom was, after all, one of the most excellent modified humans in Violet. His nervous system had been assisted by sophisticated circuits and remote supercomputers. Although he only saw a black shadow flash in front of his eyes, he still reacted in the end. He covered his head with one hand and stabbed the high-frequency dagger at the black shadow in front of him with the other. He did not believe that the other party would not dare to dodge the high-frequency dagger. This was also the result of the supercomputer's calculations. Sure enough, the black shadow retreated. However, before Tom could react, the other party had already kicked his knee. In Li Anping's eyes, Tom's movements were like a movie that had been slowed down by 50 times. His body tilted and slowly wanted to fall to the side. He thought for a moment and kicked Tom's waist again. With a crack, the exoskeleton armor shattered. The force was then transmitted to Tom's body, causing a series of sparks. The electronic equipment on his body could not withstand the impact of such a huge force and flashed a large cluster of electric sparks. Under the propulsion of this force, Tom flew toward the sky with a hunched back. It was only when he was in midair that Tom reacted. By then, his speed had gradually slowed down, and he was about to land slowly. A boom rang out from the ground below Tom. Tom's electronic eyes tried their best to capture the scene, but he could only see a blurry black shadow flashing before him. Right now, Tom no longer felt complacent. Instead, he was filled with terror. The abilities that Li Onping had displayed were like that of a demon in human skin. The black shadow flashed by, and with a crackling sound, large clusters of electric sparks burst out from Tom's right hand. His entire right arm, which was mechanized, lost all feeling from Li Onping's palm strike. With a furious bellow, the terrified Tom swung his left fist with the help of the supercomputer. Bringing along a series of sounds of wind and thunder, he punched out toward the black shadow. His fist was encased in metal armor, and the impact joints at his wrist and elbow amplified the force layer by layer. He punched out toward Li Onping with a force of 2 tons. However, this punch, which could destroy cities and strongholds, was easily received by Li Onping with a single right hand. He held on to Tom's fist and broke into a brutal smile. "Your strength isn't bad." It was only then that Li Onping and Tom, who were in midair, stopped rising and started to land together. Li Onping looked at the other party's panicked gaze and clenched his right hand, which was holding onto Tom's fist. In an instant, countless metal fragments, electric wires, and twisted parts shot out from the gaps between Li Onping's right hand's fingers. Amidst agonizing cries, Tom drew back his bare left hand. However, there was no time for him to feel regret or fear. He had already been pressed down by Li Onping by the neck and smashed into the ground. Boom! Amidst the flying sand and rocks, the two of them created a small pit in the muddy ground. Li Onping rode on Tom's body and said calmly, "Didn't you say that you were going to chop off all my limbs?" Saying that, he grabbed onto Tom's left arm and pulled hard. Amidst a series of electric sparks, he tore off the other party's metal arm, together with a few electric wires and energy pipes at the arm and shoulder, into 2. Tom let out an enraged bellow that sounded like a wild beast's howl of despair. He opened his mouth and shot out a laser beam. The high-density laser beam melted the skin on Li Onping's shoulder, vaporized, and then evaporated. Seeing that the laser beam shot out from Tom's mouth was going to move toward Li Onping's chest and destroy his entire body, Li Onping reacted quickly. He grabbed onto Tom's chin and then squeezed it hard. Tom's alloy bones seemed to have turned into soft mud. Tom's chin, lower jaw, and neck were crushed by Li Onping's big hand. The parts where the high-energy laser beam was shot out were also crushed by the tremendous force. However, at the next moment, Tom's body suddenly trembled, and an endless stream of high-energy ultrasonic waves were released from his chest. Li Onping, who was the closest to Tom, was the first to be hit. The air pressure caused by such high-frequency sound waves was enough to make ordinary people lose their battle capabilities completely. It could even penetrate through walls up to 15 meters and kill people. However, Li Onping, who was encompassed by the ultrasonic waves, seemed to be completely fine. He tilted his head, looked at Tom, and said, "You have quite a lot of tricks up your sleeves." Then he reached out to grab Tom's chest and tore off the exoskeleton armor. He then peeled off a large number of electric wires, protective layers, and buffer layers. In the end, he finally found the ultrasonic generator. He tore it off forcefully and tossed it aside. Seeing that all of his means had been easily neutralized, Tom looked at Li Onping and shook his head desperately, as if wanting to beg for mercy. However, it was a pity that his throat and lower jaw had been crushed, and he was unable to make a sound. No matter what means he used, they were like laughable toys when faced with Li Onping. Li Onping had easily neutralized his fatal attacks. Fang Xingjian's strength had completely exceeded his imagination. At this moment, he was filled with despair, regret, and annoyance. The shadow of death was like a venomous snake, coiling around his heart. However, just as Li Onping thought that Tom no longer had the ability to resist, many small holes suddenly appeared on Tom's body. A lot of white mist spurted out from the small holes, completely enveloping Li Onping's surroundings like clouds. What is this thing now? You should know that the poisonous gas is ineffective against me. The cloud of mist quickly shrouded the area within a radius of 100 meters. Although Li Onping did not feel any discomfort, he planned to retreat. If he had received Xia Dragonfinch's training and had been on the battlefield, he would know that the thing that was spurting out from Tom's body was known as an aerosol. At this moment, it was too late for Li Onping to leave. A hint of despair flashed in Tom's eyes. He regretted coming here to deal with Li Onping so recklessly. If he had known earlier, he would have brought along over 10 more destruction warriors. However, it was too late for regrets now. His self-detonation sequence had been activated. At the next moment, intense flames burst out from his body, and the entire cloud of mist exploded. The aerosol and the oxygen in the air reacted with each other, releasing a large amount of energy in an instant. The place where Li Onping and Tom were standing was occupied by a huge fireball. The temperature of the fireball exceeded 2,500 degrees Celsius, and it covered the area within a radius of 1,000 kilometers within 1 second. The shock waves swept through the entire forest with seething air currents. Then, the forest was immediately turned into ashes by the flames. Under the high temperature and high pressure, the entire ground was scorched. 1 minute later, the fireball and smoke slowly rose into the air from the ground that had been blown up by the explosion, turning into a mushroom cloud that appeared in the valley. This was a fuel-air explosive. It did not have the destructive power of a small nuclear bomb. After the explosion, as the oxygen had been fully utilized in the explosion, there would be a severe lack of oxygen for about 4 minutes at the scene, and the survivors of the explosion would be killed a second time. 1,000 meters away, Fang Qi stared blankly at the mushroom cloud in the distance. After thinking for a while, he walked over. Inside the villa, they felt the tremors and saw the flames. The members of the Qilin group seemed to have guessed something at the first moment. When they saw the mushroom cloud rising, they hurriedly rushed toward the location of the explosion. Chapter 72. In a distant command center in Xia. In the highest management of Violet de Xia, Wilson was looking at the huge screen in front of him with an ashen face. However, the screen was already covered by a large piece of snow. It was this screen that had been broadcasting the entire battle through Tom's electronic eyes. The connection has been completely lost, one of his subordinates said. The communication system has also lost its feedback signal. Sir Tom should be dead. Even the transformation of the Warrior of Destruction would be difficult to withstand at the center of the explosion. Li Onping. Wilson muttered to himself. Compared to Jennifer's report, this Li Onping's value is much higher, right? The subordinate said with lingering fear. Yes, according to our calculations, the experimental target's bench press strength is more than 20 tons. His punching speed is close to the speed of sound, and the structure of his muscles, organs, and nerves is different from that of ordinary people, which makes his resistance to attacks comparable to that of ordinary tank armor. This may not be his full strength, but it's obviously beyond the theoretical limits of the human body. We suspect he's probably not human. Haha, not human? Wilson sneered. This is your conclusion? He's an ability user. Nothing is impossible with superpowers. What do you think is the possibility of him surviving the attack of the fuel-air bomb? The man thought for a moment and said, after the explosion of the fuel-air bomb, the central temperature reached 2,500 degrees. It's impossible to survive just by relying on the body. Unless he has other abilities, he's dead. Wilson nodded and said, send a team to check. Tom's remains need to be recovered. As for Li Onping, his body is very valuable for research. We need to see him if he's alive or dead." In the valley, the fireball had disappeared, but the dust from the shockwave was still floating in the air. Fang Qi squatted on the ground and looked at the scorched land in front of him. A trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. It should be a fuel-air bomb. But who detonated it? Why did they detonate it here? And where did that gigolo escape to? Fang Qi's doubts came one after another, but no one could answer him. He could only walk toward the center of the explosion, hoping to find the answer there. As Fang Qi approached, he could only see a large area of scorched land. The originally lush forest had disappeared. There was nothing else. After walking for another few hundred meters, Fang Qi's eyes narrowed, and he quickly walked forward. A wreckage finally appeared in his field of vision. It was a completely charred piece of metal. From Fang Qi's perspective, it seemed to be a part of some equipment. He walked over and found that the metal block was still emitting an astonishingly high temperature. Clearly, it had been heated up by the explosion just now. Just then, a series of rustling footsteps sounded from behind Fang Qi. "Who is it?" Fang Qi turned his head and looked behind him. Amidst the smoke and dust, a figure was walking towards Fang Qi. "Speak, who are you?" That person didn't answer and just walked towards Fang Qi step by step. The black scales on Fang Qi's body and neck stood up one by one as he looked in the direction the figure was coming from with a guarded expression. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew past and blew away the dust in front of him, revealing the appearance of the person who had just arrived. It was a bald man with no eyebrows and no clothes on his body. The man's face was abnormally pale, and his lips were bloodless. The strangest thing was his skin. It was white with a tinge of red, looking as delicate as a baby's. "It's you." After looking for a while, Fang Qi suddenly opened his eyes wide and shouted. Then he laughed the next moment. "I should say it's your misfortune. I might not have been able to catch up to you, but I didn't expect this explosion to attract you here." Fang Qi's right hand released electric light, and the blue electric light made his smile even more sinister. "Although I don't know why you changed your appearance, I'll subdue you first and ask you later. Think carefully." Before Fang Qi could finish, Li Anping had already disappeared. Then a huge force came from the back of his head, and Fang Qi fell to the ground with his face flat on the ground. He wanted to stand up, but he found that the other party's foot was stepping on the back of his head. The terrifying force pressed his head inch by inch into the ground. Sand and rocks filled his mouth. If he hadn't closed his eyes, some of the soil would have already entered his eyes. "Sorry, I'm in a very bad mood right now." Li Anping's voice floated out from behind him. "So, what I'm going to do to you next is just purely to vent my anger." Then, Fang Qi felt a force that was 10 times stronger than before pressing down on him from the other party's foot. He slapped the ground with all his might and raised his neck. However, the other party's foot was like a mountain pressing down on his head, pressing his head into the ground. Even his skull and scales started to gradually deform. Muffled sounds rang out from under Li Anping's foot. Those were the sounds of Fang Qi struggling. However, because his mouth was filled with soil, Li Anping could not hear what he was saying clearly, nor did he want to hear it. Creaking sounds rang out from the back of Fang Qi's head, where Li Anping was stepping on. Fang Qi's hands clawed at the ground, and his thick fingers dug out 10 long scratches on the ground. Then electric sparks emerged from Fang Qi's body, and blue electric sparks were instantly transmitted to Li Anping's body. However, the electric charge that was enough to electrocute a whale only made Li Anping frown slightly, and the force under his foot slowed down a little. Just as Fang Qi thought that he had succeeded, an even more ferocious and unreasonable force came from under Li Anping's foot, instantly crushing the bones at the back of Fang Qi's head. With a puff sound, Fang Qi's head exploded like a watermelon that had been thrown to the ground. His body twitched unconsciously a few times, and then he stopped moving. His feelings when he was being stepped on were probably rather complicated. At the beginning, he was furious and violent. Later on, he was shocked by Li Anping's strength, and then he was in disbelief when he realized that he could not resist no matter what. Finally, he felt despair, absurdity, and bafflement. Who is this guy? How can he be so strong? I was trampled to death like a cockroach. Wasn't he running the entire time? I am Feng Qi, Qilin Group's leader, the one who inherited the 100 Moon royal clan's bloodline, the man who unified Jadeite City's underworld. I was actually trampled to death like a cockroach by an unknown pretty boy? How is this possible? Even until the last second before his death, Feng Qi still felt disbelief towards this reality, feeling that it was absurd. However, reality was right in front of everyone's eyes. Regret filled Feng Qi's mind, but it was already too late. When Lucien brought the remaining members of Qilin Group to the location of the explosion, what they saw was this reality. Feng Qi, who had the strength of a quasi-4th-level ability user, who possessed Qilin blood ability, who defeated Lu Jun and the 4 heavenly kings, was trampled into the earth by someone just like that. The other party was even completely naked, arms crossed in front of his chest, leisurely sizing up these people. That type of expression of contempt was as if he had just trampled a cockroach to death. You all, how are you prepared to die? Lucien only said one word, and the other party already frowned impatiently. In the next moment, Lucien only saw an afterimage flash past, and the people around him already fell to the ground, their bodies covered in blood. Forget it. I don't feel like talking to you all anymore. Lian Ping's hand, covered in blood, stopped in front of Lucien's body. That bright red color was like a flower, blooming drop by drop on Lucien's collar. You are Lucien. I am. Lucien replied stupidly, unable to raise any thoughts of resistance in his heart. The strength the other party displayed already completely exceeded his understanding. Good. Lian Ping lifted Lucien's neck, as if he was carrying a vegetable basket, and walked towards the villa. In a moment, past the position of Loyalty Hall's boss to someone. Lucien only nodded blankly, not knowing whether or not he reacted. Lian Ping's mumbling sound entered his ears. How did you die after being trampled a few times, so troublesome? After continuously killing many ability users, Lian Ping's current physical fitness had already reached Strength 6. 1 Speed 5. 0 and Stamina 6. 9. Chapter 73. When the chaos in Jadeite City finally came to an end, in the distant western continent, tens of thousands of kilometers away from the eastern continent where Xia was located, something that would affect the direction of the entire human world in a few years was quietly happening. In the western continent, on the western coast of the MS Federation, it was 11 o'clock at night. For some reason, the moon in the sky was emitting a pale white light that made people's hearts palpitate. On the beach, 2 rows of strange footprints could be vaguely seen. They looked like the hoof prints of horses, but they were not as messy as those of 4 legs. The tide rose on the beach and covered the hoof prints. When the water receded, the hoof prints on the beach were no longer obvious. The hoof prints stretched all the way to the forest by the beach. The smell of blood came from the ground. At the edge of the forest, there was a dead seabird. Half of the seabird's head was bitten off, as if it had been eaten by something. The rest of the body was casually thrown on the ground. Looking at the dark forest, it was eerily quiet. It made people feel a chill, as if something terrifying was staring at them. At that moment, there was a sudden cry from the depths of the forest. But the next moment, the cry stopped, as if someone had pressed it back into the throat. Vaguely, there was a strange chewing sound. Walking in the direction of the sound, they saw all kinds of animal corpses along the way. Birds with their heads bitten off, small animals with their stomachs cut open. They were all casually thrown on the ground, as if they were toys that a child was tired of playing with. The moonlight shining down from the sky became even paler, but it could not dispel the darkness in the forest. At the place where the cry came from, the body of a blond white man was lying on the ground. His chest had been cut open, and blood-red organs were all over the ground. His face was full of horror, as if he had seen a ghost. 2 pitch-black shadows crawled beside him. In the dark forest, it was impossible to see the appearance of the shadows. The bodies of the two shadows seemed to be constantly emitting black smoke, as if they were darkness itself. One of the shadows pulled something that looked like a tentacle or a claw out of the white man's head, and a stream of brain matter was brought to the ground. Then, a strange human voice sounded. It sounded like a baby who had just learned how to speak. The voice was intermittent, but the tone itself was full of maturity. It did not sound like a child's voice at all. The continent, is filled with humans' need to find black. I can't feel him. He's asleep. Hide, search, need, report. The other black shadow trembled for a moment, then slowly walked toward the coastline. The black shadow that spoke inserted its tentacles back into the white man's brain. In the next moment, something surprising happened. Amidst a strange rustling sound, the black shadow gradually became smaller and softer. Bit by bit, it made its way into the white man's head. 5 minutes later, the two black figures had disappeared. The white man, who was supposed to be dead, suddenly sat up. His eyes didn't even blink as he stared in the direction of Great Xia. The corners of his mouth revealed a strange smile. Chapter 74. 10,000 meters in the sky. A huge blue and white passenger plane was flying towards the north of Xia. The interior of the plane had more than 400 cubic meters of space. In addition to some seats and seat belts, the entire plane was equipped with bedrooms, bathrooms, a gym, a restaurant, an office, a medical center, and even an operating table. Most of the furniture on the plane was made by skilled carpentry. This luxurious plane, which could be called a palace in the sky, belonged to the Xia Dragonfinch, Xia Lycon. At this time, in the restaurant on the lower level of the plane, Li Onping and Li Qian were sitting at the table eating. The food on the plane was provided by the kitchen in the sky. The ingredients were all of the best quality and were provided by professionals. Li Qian usually didn't eat much in order to maintain her figure. This time, she ate more than usual. In comparison, Li Onping ate a lot. Although souls could be his energy source, he was very happy to use food as a substitute. Besides, the food in the kitchen was very delicious. Li Qian wiped her mouth and watched Li Onping eat for a while. Then, she poured herself a glass of red wine. She asked, "Do you want some?" Li Onping shook his head and stuffed another piece of steak into his mouth. Li Qian took a sip of red wine and showed a look of enjoyment. Seeing Li Onping still wolfing down his food, she couldn't help but ask, "Is it enough? Are you full? Do you want me to ask them to bring more?" Li Onping ate the last roast chicken, wiped his mouth, and said, "It's enough. There's no point in eating too much. Aren't you going to ask why I brought you to Tianjin?" Li Onping looked up at Li Qian and said, "I believe you must have your reasons. I just want to help you." Li Qian heard this and looked at Li Onping eagerly. Li Onping awkwardly turned his head and said, "Your ability is very useful. I'm not familiar with Tianjin, so I need your help." As if she knew what Li Onping was worried about, Li Qian continued, "Don't worry, I will do my best to help you. You don't have to worry about the Jadeite city. Qin Yong has taken over the Loyalty Hall, and Lucien has been placed under house arrest. When he has no more value, he will be executed. Those cadres of the Loyalty Hall would also be dealt with later. But why did you ask Qin Yong to do it? He's a good policeman. I hope he can do a good job. Through the cooperation of the Zhomi Hall and the police, the security of the Jadeite city will be reduced. I don't expect him to completely eliminate prostitution, drug trafficking, gambling, and other criminal activities. I just hope that they will become fewer. I hope that the next time I come to Jadeite City, I can kill fewer people." Li Onping looked at his hand and asked, "What about Fong Qi?" I didn't want to kill him, but who knew he was so weak? A drop of cold sweat appeared on Li Qian's head, and she bitterly smiled. Fong Qi is already very strong. According to the information from the intelligence department, among the younger generation of the Bayou country, he is also in the top 10. If it wasn't for his illegitimate identity, he wouldn't have come to the Xia. Illegitimate? Is it confirmed? Li Onping asked. Li Qian nodded. The information from the intelligence department. You don't know how angry Xiao Laikong was that day. He scolded all of us to the bone. But fortunately, you kept the body intact. Now that they have taken back Feng Qi's body, this can be considered an unexpected surprise. The 6 major abilities were different, and the causes were also different. For example, the bloodline ability. All the major organizations in the world generally believed that it originated from human DNA. Therefore, the bodies of bloodline ability users were often worth thousands of gold, especially the bloodline ability users, which was a relatively famous ability like the Qilin blood. As the exclusive ability of the Baiyu country's royal family, it was something that all the organizations wanted to research. Li Qian's eyes flashed with a trace of worry. However, the Baiyu country has already begun to exert pressure. Although they didn't say it clearly, everyone knows that it's because of Feng Qi. You have to be careful when you arrive in Tianjin. Right now, the situation in the north is tense. If the Baiyu country takes this opportunity to make things difficult, I'm afraid that the Xia Dragonfinch won't be able to withstand the pressure and will hand you over. In your opinion, will Xia Laikong do that? Liamping asked faintly. Li Qian shook her head. I don't know, but into Xia Dragonfinch, Xia Laikong isn't the only one who makes decisions. The flying general, Zhu Rong, and the head captain of the special task force. At least these 3 people, regardless of strength or power, are not inferior to Xia Laikong. Do you know their abilities? Except for Xia Laikong, who has multiple abilities, the other 3 people's abilities are extremely secret. But from the name, the flying general should be able to fly, right? Zhu Rong might be able to control fire. That's not necessarily true. Lian Ping said, names, nicknames, they might all be used to confuse others. Lian Ping snapped his fingers, and a few people walked in from outside the restaurant and began to clean up the table. Li Qian followed him to the upper level of the plane. But it doesn't matter. I have no conflict of interest with them. As long as they don't do anything they shouldn't do, I have no interest in dealing with them. Li Qian nodded slightly and obediently followed Li Anping to the bedroom. There was a computer, an internet cable, a wooden cabinet, a leather set, a spear stand, and even a bathroom. Not only was it well equipped, but there was also a floor-to-ceiling mirror, an electric shaving table, and other modern equipment. You rest. I'm going to surf the internet. Liamping walked towards the leather sofa in the middle of the room. Li Qian nodded obediently. She knew that Li Anping surfed the internet every day and received a lot of information from the internet. Some of it was factual news, which was one of the bases for his investigation. There is also a lot of knowledge in various fields, such as interrogation, language, psychology, finance, and military. He was like a whirlpool, crazily receiving information from all kinds of channels. Li Anping, who was lying on the sofa, immediately sank in. His right hand reached for the cabinet next to the sofa. There was a tablet on it, which was connected to the wireless internet on the plane. He turned on the tablet, and there was a half-watched video. The name of the video was Basics of Swordsmanship for Children. Li Anping clicked to continue the video. He could see a 14-year-old child holding a sword, making basic movements such as slashing, stabbing, pointing, and flipping. The cycle repeated. This was the swordsmanship that Li Anping had been studying recently. He had not even started studying how to use the high-frequency knife. Although with his strength and speed, it would be very powerful if he were to use it to slash randomly. He still planned to take a look at more teaching materials about saber arts and sword arts. This was to prevent him from using the wrong strength and destroying the Murasma saber. After all, the great Xia Dragonfinch didn't equip all of its members with this equipment. Li Anping's pupils reflected the simple swordsmanship movements of the young man in the video. His brain instantly recorded these movements and then compared them with the text teaching materials that he had read before. In the past, when he punched and kicked, it was just a casual attack. However, after reading these teaching materials, he realized that there was a lot of knowledge in these punches, kicks, swords, and sabers. It could be said that he had wasted most of his strength when he used to be so reckless. If he could use the strength of every muscle and bone according to the teaching materials, his destructive power would increase by leaps and bounds. Why get to Tianjin? I need to find a place to practice. A series of different martial arts teaching materials flashed through Li Onping's mind. Then he thought that the Xia Dragonfinch, as a military superpower organization, should have more practical teaching materials in this area. The teaching materials on the internet were confusing. Li Onping even found so-called secret books that could control swords, spit fire, and palm thunder. Most people would find it difficult to distinguish the real from the fake martial arts books. Many of them were mainly for fitness, not for killing enemies. Although Li Onping had self-healing abilities and was not afraid of random practice, it was a waste of time to blindly practice. I heard from Dongman that Baiwei country had a special martial arts school for the royal family. Many ability users who used their physical bodies to fight needed to learn fighting and fighting techniques. The Xia Dragonfinch must not lack these ability users. There should also be martial arts teaching materials in this area, just like the military combat skills of ordinary people. When the time comes, I will ask Xia Laikong to get a copy so I could take a look. However, even with this plan, Li Onping still finished watching some of the videos he had found on the plane. They were all basic skills, but they were already very enlightening for him. Looking at the white clouds outside the window, Li Onping thought of his purpose for going to Tianjin. As the center of the Xia, there would be more criminals and ability users for him to devour. There would also be more resources to train him. He would become stronger and stronger until no one could stop him. 5:45 in the afternoon, Tianjin International Airport. Li Onping and Li Qian walked out of the airport gate with suitcases. Li Qian hung up the phone and said to Li Onping beside her, "They told us to wait here. They will be here soon." Li Onping nodded and did not say anything. He was looking at the materials on his phone. They were all introductions about Tianjin, maps of Tianjin, and various popular attractions. They looked like ordinary tourists who had come because of its fame. Half an hour later. "Hey, what are you doing? You said they would be here, but we waited for half an hour and there was no one. How are you working? Traffic jam? Why didn't you come out earlier? I want to complain to your leader." Li Qian scolded a few more times and finally hung up the phone fiercely. Then she said to Li Onping apologetically, "Sorry, they said there was a traffic jam on the way. They will be here in 3 hours, so they told us to take the subway ourselves. Sorry, I didn't arrange it properly." Li Qian lowered her head, her face full of self-blame. "These slippery people. I think they think we are newcomers and want to show us who is boss." "It's okay, Li Qian." Li Onping raised his head, turned back to the airport, and walked toward the subway on the second floor of the basement. "Taking the subway is also good," he said. "I just checked online. The traffic situation in Tianjin is very bad. Driving is not as fast as taking the subway. Also, the subway here extends in all directions, so you don't have to walk much." "Yes." Li Qian nodded and did not say anything. Once Li Onping spoke, she would respect Li Onping's decision. Chapter 75. As the people who were supposed to receive them couldn't arrive in time, Li Onping and Li Qian had no choice but to take the subway to their destination. That was the place that Xia Laikong had arranged for them to stay temporarily in Tianjin. Xia Laikong himself had a meeting today, so he would only come and meet them tomorrow. Tianjin was indeed very prosperous, and it also gave Li Onping many surprises. There was an endless stream of people and densely packed tall buildings. The ground was also very clean, and the public toilets didn't have any stench. The shops in the airport were well equipped with all kinds of food, drinks, and entertainment. The public security was also better than Li Onping had imagined. At least, from the airport to the subway, Li Onping didn't find any thieves despite using all his eyesight and listening attentively. This was much better than Jadeite City. It's just that there are too many people. Li Onping looked at the crowd in front of the subway station and couldn't help but frown. Seeing Li Onping frown, Li Qian said, "Forget it, there are too many people. Why don't we take a taxi?" "It's okay. Let's take the subway." Li Onping relaxed his frown. There will be traffic anyway, so it's faster to take the subway. A few minutes later, the crowd became more and more congested, but the subway finally arrived. Li Onping and Li Qian squeezed into the subway with the crowd. Because they were squeezed by the crowd, Li Yonping could only try to relax his body as much as possible, for fear that he would be pushed to death by others. Fortunately, the two of them were lucky enough to squeeze to the entrance. The train was full of people, and there was no space to stand at all. Therefore, the people behind them couldn't squeeze in anymore. Just as Li Qian heaved a sigh of relief, she suddenly felt a black shadow rush over. She saw a tall and strong man carrying a travel bag, and his back was directly facing the train. Li Qian cried out in pain. She could feel the man's back leaning against the travel bag. He kept pushing Li Qian, who was standing at the door, into the car. However, there were no more seats in the carriage. When he pushed, several people in the carriage began to complain in low voices. The man's head was dripping with sweat. The travel bag was leaning against Li Qian's body, and it kept squeezing in. Squeeze in a little more. Just a bit further in. There are still seats available. As he spoke, he squeezed with all his might, but he suddenly felt a hand pressing down on his shoulder, and he couldn't move at all. The man shouted at Li Yonping, "What are you doing? What are you doing with your hand?" Li Yonping said impatiently, "The bus is full. Why are you squeezing? Wait for the next bus." "Hey, does your family own this subway? It's none of your business whether I squeeze or not." The man's face and neck were red as he stared at Li Yonping and shouted, "I'm in a hurry, so I have to get on this bus. What's wrong with that?" After that, he tried to squeeze in the direction of the train and push Li Yonping's hand away. However, Li Yonping's strength was not something he could shake. The man felt as if he had bumped into a mountain, and the mountain was pressing down on him. From an outsider's point of view, they saw Li Yonping gently waving his hand, and the man seemed to be pushed by someone. He ran more than 10 meters toward the platform before stopping. As soon as he stopped, he immediately turned around and cursed at Li Yonping. He even wanted to rush towards the carriage. However, after a few steps, the train door closed. He could only watch as Li Yonping calmly disappeared in front of his eyes. The place that Xia Laikong arranged for Li Qian and Li Yonping was a residential area in the northwest suburbs of Tianjin. It was about 40 kilometers away from the city center. The two took the subway and were squeezed in the middle. After more than half an hour, they finally got off the station. After getting off the station, according to the address Xia Laikong gave them and the map on their phone, the two walked and finally found the place. In front of them was a residential area of villas. Li Yonping glanced around. The residential area was filled with villas. Basically, they all had private garages, gardens, lawns, and courtyards. The villas were all a few hundred meters apart. Whether it was the greenery or the decoration, they all looked very high-end. As soon as the two walked to the gate, they were stopped by the security guard. "Hello, both of you? Are you looking for someone?" The young security guard said with a smile. "Hello, I'm Li Qian. Someone should have already informed you." Li Qian walked up and talked to the security guard. Li Yonping, on the other hand, looked around and found that there were cameras everywhere. Most of the parked cars and the cars that drove and were expensive. Even the street lights on the road outside the residential area were special. They were different from the ordinary street lights. They were stone pillar street lights in the same style as the residential area. No matter how one looked at it, this was a high-end residential area for the rich. After some negotiation, the security guard confirmed Li Qian's identity. The way he looked at the two of them became more respectful. "The two of you, the villa you live in is a bit far. Let us send you there." As he said that, another security guard drove an electric four-wheeled vehicle. It looked a bit like an electric golf cart. Li Qian glanced at Li Yonping. Seeing that he did not object, she got in. Along the way, Li Qian and the security guard chatted intermittently and asked about the details of this residential area. However, they did not get much information. They only knew that the people in this residential area were either rich or respectable. They had strong backgrounds, especially many familiar faces from the TV news. Li Yonping did not participate in the conversation. He looked at the scenery in the residential area. The level of luxury was better than Shangjing's Aqua Arc back in Zhongdu. Swimming pool, golf course, gym. These are all very ordinary. The residential area even had a hospital, cinema, and shopping mall. Not only that, the security guards here were different from the other residential areas. They looked younger. Moreover, from Lianping's perspective, these security guards were not weak. All of them were powerful and shrewd. They looked a bit like the members of the Qilin group. However, they were more orderly and disciplined than the members of the Qilin group. Lianping instinctively did not like this place. However, he did not hate it to the point that he wanted to leave immediately. The electric scooter jogged along, and they arrived at their destination 10 minutes later. This was the northernmost villa in the residential area. Compared to the other villas, due to the orchard, it occupied a larger area. However, the decoration was more simple. It only had 2 floors. The walls were covered with ivy, and the iron gate looked rusty. Lianping and the others walked up to the iron gate and saw a red sports car slowly driving out from the underground garage. When the sport car reached the iron gate, the gate opened automatically. The sports car stopped in front of Lianping and the others. The car window rolled down, and a sweet, young face appeared in front of everyone. "Who are you? Who are you looking for in my house?" The young woman looked at Lianping and the others and asked curiously. The woman was not old. Her face was tender and white. She looked youthful. However, in terms of appearance, she was not inferior to Li Qian. However, with her colorful hair and high eyebrows, she gave off an arrogant and domineering feeling. She did not seem easy to get close to. "Miss Xia, this is Miss Li Qian. Old Xia arranged for them to stay here." "What? They want to stay here?" The woman frowned. She glared at Li Qian and shouted, "No, this is my house. How can you let other women stay here? I forbid it. You can arrange for them to stay in a hotel. I don't let just anyone stay here." But the security guard was in a dilemma. Seeing this, Li Qian met the girl's gaze and said, "General Xia asked us to stay here. I think there must be some misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding. Xia Laikong is my grandfather. He didn't tell me to arrange for people to stay here." The girl pressed the car horn and said impatiently, "You can stay wherever you want. My house is not allowed." "Miss Xia, shouldn't you call your grandfather to confirm? He did give me the address." "Confirm what?" The girl saw that Li Qian still wanted to argue. She ordered the security guard. "Didn't you hear what I said? Hurry up and take them out. I advise you to investigate more. Don't just let anyone in. You've raised the level of this place." The security guard helplessly said to Li Qian, "Miss Li, why don't you stay in the hotel in the community and wait for old Xia to come?" "You." Li Qian was about to open her mouth. However, Lianping said, "Forget it, Li Qian. This is not a good place. We'll just find a place to stay." Who knew that after he said this, the girl would speak again. "What are you talking about? Why are you speaking so sarcastically? You don't have the money to stay here, so you say this place is not good? Let me tell you, you can't afford to buy a toilet here in your lifetime." After that, she looked at Lianping's ordinary clothes and plain suitcase with disdain. Hearing that Lianping didn't insult her, Li Qian was furious. She threw a piece of paper at the girl's eyes. Who would have thought that before the piece of paper flew a meter away, the 2 security guards reacted instantly. One of them stood in front of the girl and caught the piece of paper. The other person directly rushed towards Li Qian, wanting to subdue her. Li Qian's ability was only level 0. She didn't really want to touch the girl. She only wanted to scare her. Therefore, the paper was soft and was caught by the security guard. But when the security guard looked towards Li Qian, he saw that his companion who rushed towards Li Qian had been grabbed by the neck by Lianping and thrown towards him. The 2 people collided together and rolled on the ground like gourds. However, they were indeed well-trained soldiers. After rolling a few times, they stood up. They directly took out their pistols and pointed them at Lianping, who was in front of Li Qian. "Don't move. Squat down and put your hands on your head." Only then did the girl react. She sat in the car and shouted, "Okay, you want to kill me? Quickly arrest these 2 terrorists. I want to interrogate them personally." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.